Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Maybe. Okay. Twitch. Twitch doing things. Ow. Fingers. Will Twitch behave now? Who knows? Exactly. We're playing a fun little game of will Twitch behave today.
Okay. You ready for the countdown?
Alright, ready?
By the way, you're not at 3:03:32 or 30. You're at 3:03:32.
I see that now.
So I moved up to 3:03:32, but
Oh, okay.
it is monumental how I had to tell you the time to go to 4 times you did get there.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to control your YouTube, I assume, from the pop-out window.
It really is. Alright.
And with a trackpad.
We good?
You have to get QPU aligned with the time. So that you're at least a multiple of 5 fucking parallel universes away, so you can use the arrow keys to align yourself.
That's fair. It's not like
you didn't mention that I said QPU aligned.
God damn it.
Give me the countdown, god damn it.
Alright. 3, 2, 1, play.
This ABC video, public pressure on him to keep creating similar content was mounting. Memes about half A-presses and Scuttlebug Jamborees were parroted in every comment section of not just his videos, but pretty much every Super Mario 64 video out there.
This should be,
was being reminded of the video and its nightmarish production cycle at just about every corner. His mental scars were still fresh, so he knew there was no way he would make anything at the scale of Watch for Rolling Rocks until he would actually feel ready to undertake the project. It's widely believed that the memes were the reason Pan and Cook quit making commentated videos, but they actually were a tiny factor in the equation. The main reason behind it is quite simply that he doesn't enjoy making voice commentary, and making such videos represented too much tedious work unless they were exceptionally worth it. So, after releasing that video, he decided to switch his mindset. A-Button Challenge videos would go on his secondary channel, which he renamed Uncommented.
Good for him changing his mindset and doing something else.
Yeah.
Good for him doing something that's good for his mental health.
The first step was to
it's really
release a
important
bunch
not to
of
let people who
ABC
are, like,
improvements he had been holding on to
burning
since
the
the
fuck out,
discovery
like,
of Scuttlebug
continue doing so.
Raising
It's
in
important to
October
get away
until
from
he could
that.
get around to making commentated explanations. So on January 13, 2016, he dumped 5 improvements at once, then went relatively inactive in the A-Button Challenge for the better part of the year, instead focusing on glitch documentation and explanation videos on his secondary channel. Every improvement from Panen's backlog stemmed from the discovery of Scuttlebug Raising. It helped.
I'm glad that he made that decision for mental health.
Gave stars that used hyperspeed and elevators. First, Amazing Emergency Exit, solved by raising a Scuttlebug for half an hour until it would jump into the right spot for Mario to bounce across to the star, and second, the red coin star. He could manipulate it from the first room, but only if the Scuttlebug was in the perfect position. To get it in the perfect spot, he had to go down in the red coin's room. To go back to the first room, he needed to cross this gap in no A-presses. Thankfully, 2 Scuttlebugs could be transported over, and Mario could bounce on them both to go back to the red coin's room. From there, just 1 hour of Scuttlebug Raising was sufficient to have the Scuttlebug fall on Mario to discard saving another
just an hour, you know?
The other applications of Scuttlebug Raising were in Big Boo's Haunt, and they were a bit more involved. Here, 1 A-press was left to grab the star in the merry-go-round, and 1 was required to reach the top floor of the mansion for both Big Boo's balcony and eye-to-eye in the secret room. Let's start with Big Boo's merry-go-round. Panen got a Scuttlebug into a specific spot against the side of the mansion with Scuttlebug transportation. Then, by alternating between going near the Scuttlebug to get it to turn around and activating it by standing by the front door, Panen was able to raise the Scuttlebug.
Hope you're doing well.
How much does he raise it, do you ask? Well, only about 10 times. Sorry, 10 hours. After 10 hours, the Scuttlebug
that's a big difference there.
Only about 10 hours.
Yeah, that's a big difference between 10 times.
Or VPUs for short, function slightly differently than regular PUs do. Here is the vertical position that overflows rather than the horizontal position.
Oh no.
The result is different for Mario than it is for enemies, so let's look at what happens specifically to the Scuttlebug when it reaches a VPU. When the position initially overflows, the Scuttlebug's floor detection doesn't find any floor under itself, so its behavior becomes a bit more erratic. Instead of turning towards Mario, it spins in place. Panon can still keep raising it just fine despite that limitation. Once it gets even higher, it reaches dimension relatively in the VPU, but floors and ceilings are not solid, so it can keep raising through and above the virtual map. Once it's high enough, Panon reactivates the Scuttlebug and it jumps down. Again, because floors and ceilings are not solid in VPUs, the Scuttlebug goes through the level and into the basement, where it collides with the wall. Contrarily to regular PUs, VPUs do have solid walls, and they have a peculiar property. When the Scuttlebug collides with the wall, it gets snapped to the wall's height in the main map. To summarize, the Scuttlebug is raised for 10 hours until it enters a vertical parallel universe so it can fall through the floor and reach a position relative to the merry-go-round in the basement. Then, it collides with the wall that snaps it back to the main map. At the same time, Mario leaves the Scuttlebug's activation range so it stops moving there. When Mario enters the merry-go-round, the Scuttlebug remains deactivated because it's hard-coded to belong to the outside of the dimension, no matter where it actually is. Despite being deactivated and invisible, the Scuttlebug is still tangible, so Mario can bounce on it and reach the star.
Oh my god.
The other application of Scuttlebug raising is to reach the
that's
highest
actually
floor of the dimension.
that was cool.
The idea
I like
is
that
quite
one.
similar, but instead, 3 different Scuttlebugs are moved to roughly
Granted,
the
all
same
these are
location
incredibly cool.
simultaneously
Like, the
raised
amount
for
of
13 hours
dedication
into
it
the
comes
VPU.
into a specific
After
challenge to do all of
reactivating
this
them,
is
Panon
so
precisely
fucking
guides
cool.
them into the room leading to the top floor, where they collide with the wall that
Oh my
snaps them
god,
back
right?
to the main map. After a little bit of additional manipulation, he's able to stagger
that was
them in
probably a
staircase
mistake
leading to the
before
upper
this.
edge. Again, because the Scuttlebugs belong to the exterior, when he goes near them, they're invisible and stuck in midair, but they are still tangible. Instead of a side flip and 2 bookend bounces, Panon Kuik
13
uses
hours
1
indeed,
bookend to get
Luis.
up on this step, then the other bookend and the 3 carefully positioned Scuttlebugs to reach
Pushed
the top
up into
floor and
another
save the
universe,
2
then trick
final
it into
A-presses
falling
in
into a
Big Boo's
pseudo
Hall.
wall. Yes.
During 2016, despite the relative inactivity of the ABC crew, thanks to the universal acclaim of Watch for Rolling Rock,
How
the
long a
A-Button
full
Challenge saw
playthrough
a
of this
large
game with
influx
this
of
challenge
fans
take?
eager to contribute
Probably
to
a
new
month.
That's
strategy
the next step of the video.
The crew
That's
got to
be the next step of the fucking A-Button
but so much work
challenge.
had already
Doing it
been
all in
done
one
that
run?
It would take a long time for newcomers to start making any meaningful progress. Or maybe all it took was just to look at the star with a fresh pair of eyes. I've left the best improvement for last, Wing Mario over the rainbow. This star was famously used by Panon Kuik as an example to demonstrate the half A-press notation. 2 A-presses were very clearly needed to shoot the cannon twice in order to get all the red coins, but in order to reach the first cannon, a half A-press was also required so that Mario would fall down slower to the cannon platform. Until Super Mario 64 Expert, SM64 Expert, found this. Yep, that's it. Instead of just running up, if you do a dive recover before the slide kick, you have just enough speed to make it without the slower fall. Near the end of 2016, what used to be just a small group of friends calling themselves the ABC crew is now a full-blown community. Millions of people had heard of the A-Button challenge. Panon Kuik was a superstar. Tens of thousands were following developments closely, celebrating each new upload even if it was all on his secondary channel by then. But soon enough, the wave of newcomers
No
realized
kidding.
the task at hand was monumental. The A-press count was now at 32. Exactly half of those were for
Fuck people who
TikTok
didn't take it
alone,
seriously,
and the
by
other
the
half
way.
for the rest of the entire game. This was the dawn of the modern era, an era defined by
Oh
the
my God.
seemingly hopeless uphill battle of solving TikTok clock.
No. No.
The modern era, conquering TikTok clock.
No.
Panon Kuik was still
How
in a
do you
period
do
of
that?
relative
What-
inactivity. Despite some developments being made in 2016, nothing was released until November when he put out a pair of improvements that had been discovered months prior. The first one was in Jolly Roger Bay. The sidewall of the ship is actually not always a wall. This is because the status of floor, wall, or ceiling is not an inherent property of a given triangle. It depends on its orientation. A triangle that is facing generally upwards is a floor, one that is facing downwards is a ceiling, and any triangle facing sideways is a wall. But as it turns out, for a triangle to be treated as a wall, it needs to be nearly perfectly vertical. As soon as it tilts just a little bit, it becomes a floor or a ceiling. As the ship sways to one side, this wall temporarily becomes a floor for just long enough that Mario can frame walk up. It was refreshing for the ABC crew to stumble upon a relatively simple
that does make sense.
Little did they know that this would be the final one. The other development came in
What do you mean the final one?
While in the past, the ABC had done its fair share of RNG manipulation when dealing with Chuckya, Goombas, and moving coins, these baby steps paled in comparison to the most advanced form of RNG.
What the fuck is that thing doing?
Manipulation. On the random setting, the clock's moving parts rely heavily on the RNG to determine their pattern.
How do you get it to do that?
The pendulum is one of them. However, its behavior is pretty bare bones. At the end of each swing, it calls the RNG function. 2/3 of the time, it swings slowly. 1/3 of the time, it swings faster. The pendulum accelerates until its angle goes beyond 0, at which point it slows down at the same speed, ending up at roughly the same angle on the other side. No matter if it swings fast or slow, this fact doesn't change. The pendulum always has the same, somewhat narrow range of motion, until something strange happens. Because the pendulum accelerates until its angle goes beyond 0, if it somehow passes directly at 0, it will accelerate on that frame and start slowing down on the next. However, when it comes back the other way, if it passes at 0 again, it would also keep accelerating for one more frame. Effectively, if the pendulum is on either side, it will experience a force pulling towards the center. But if it's exactly in the center, it will experience a force in the same direction as its movement, resulting in a net increase in total energy. The pendulum's range of motion therefore keeps increasing for each swing passing through 0. Now, two questions remain. How does the pendulum suddenly start passing through angle 0, and how can it keep passing through angle 0
how do you get
repeatedly?
It there?
Well, those are really just
that would
the
require
same
a lot of
question.
pendulum
How
mass.
can we manipulate the pendulum to do exactly what we want? When the pendulum chooses a fast or a slow swing, the option it chooses slightly changes where it will cross the middle point, and therefore where it will stop on the other side. If the acceleration was a fixed value like on the slow, fast, and still settings, the pendulum would always swing between the same 2 points. In fact, whenever the random pendulum chooses the same speed twice in a row, it returns precisely to the same point after 2 swings. But if it chooses a different speed on every swing, the slight variation in where it crosses the middle point causes the pendulum to never quite return to the same position every time. Similarly, the point where the pendulum crosses the center slightly oscillates around the middle. All that's left is to keep alternating speeds until the pendulum happens to line up exactly at angle 0. It takes 291 swings to get there. Once it gets there, what you want is the opposite. Now you want the pendulum to keep crossing angle 0 on every swing. So the pendulum has to choose the same speed on every swing to keep gaining momentum. The actual manipulation part is pretty simple, if only a bit tedious. The RNG function is a complex operation that basically takes a number from 0 to 65,535 and spits out a new, seemingly unrelated number. It iterates upon itself, which means that the output from one call becomes the input for the next call. The given input always yields the same output. For example, 2044 always yields 129, which always returns 15,937, and so on. Therefore, the RNG function is a closed loop. Once an output is the same as a previous input, the loop is closed and the values cycle in the same exact order. The full loop starts at 0 and contains 65,114 numbers. Every time the function is called, the value advances one step through the loop. This can happen multiple times in a single frame, depending on how many objects are calling RNG at any given time. Thankfully, there's one simple way for Mario to call RNG on demand, kicking up dust. To determine their exact position, dust clouds call the RNG function. Therefore, by choosing to generate dust, Mario has direct control over the RNG to a certain degree. Because the pendulum only calls the function at the end of each swing, there is plenty of time in between to manipulate RNG to a desired value. This is what PandanQuick does. Once up on this platform, he kicks up dust to get the pendulum to cycle through the 291 swings until it crosses angle 0 and starts gaining momentum. Now that pendulum manipulation is in full swing, the pendulum's range of motion keeps increasing until it swings through the ceiling and onto the next floor. Then Mario rides that swinging pendulum up and brings down time jumps on moving bars from 4 down to 3 A presses. Unfortunately, pendulum manipulation ended up only being useful in this spot since other pendulums couldn't provide any meaningful help from swinging outside of their usual range. In
So
June
all of that
2016,
to
a
say
tester by the
only
name of
one
Zimbabwe
A-press from
posted
the
a comment on
entire
Pan and
thing.
Quick's video about the pit and the pendulums in two
God.
That
A-presses.
dedication
She
is
said,
so
"Can this be done on the
impressive.
random setting? It's possible to do a kick off the wall while grabbing the star and fall all the way down to the red coin platforms. I think this could save an A-press." That comment got lost in the sea of empty claims Panin was subject to all the time. He couldn't replicate what this comment was talking about, so he dismissed the idea, just like the hundreds of other empty claims that came before and since. It took until November for Plush to look into the matter, but when he did, he found out that Zimbabwe was absolutely right. She had found a way to save one more A-press using a trick called Kick Recoil Momentum. Thanks to a convenient pendulum, Mario is able to kick the wall and pick up the star simultaneously. Normally, picking up a star zeroes out Mario's horizontal speed, but kicking the wall gives him a lot of backwards momentum. He then falls down with the star with that momentum, which is just barely enough to reach the lowest spinner and end the stage on a rotating platform. Spawning displacement does the rest of the work, and a second tick-tock clock re-entry A-press was saved.
Oh my
This
god.
also broke the tie between the Japanese Nintendo 64 version and the VC version, returning the original release to the spot of single best version for the A-button challenge. 2017 was a transitional year. Even though the community was bubbling with activity, the actual challenge itself had its most quiet year since 2012. Instead, people were busy learning more about the game and developing new tools. Specifically, Dane Boo and Pan and Quick, along with a few occasional other contributors, created the Super Mario 64 Technical Runtime Observer and Object Processor, Stroop. Stroop is basically RamWatch on steroids. It runs alongside the emulator and keeps track of every useful piece of memory. It also has the ability to hack in arbitrary values and every way of visualizing data under the sun.
God.
It took years of shaping up to make Stroop such a robust and versatile tool, but the result is worth the investment. From this point onwards, the Super Mario 64
That's
casting
so
community
cool.
as a whole benefited from the incredible work of Dane Boo, Pan and Quick, and everyone else who worked on Stroop. So by the end of the year, the ABC community was fully ready to tackle the remaining 28 A-presses. I say 28 A-presses because 2017 did have one single improvement by Iver Songe on Stomp on the Thwomp. The Pedro Spot 6 A-press method had to use an extra jump at the end because the angle Mario was coming at was not good enough to reach the star directly. Iver Songe simply found a better position and angle for the Pedro Spot that did allow
Yeah, like
for a
they
direct
legit
jump to the
developed their
star,
own
and that
fucking
was the
software
improvement
for
of the
this
year.
shit.
But while 2017 was dry for the ABC, it also saw an unlikely resurgence, the return of real-time runs. Ever since Bob Mario's flamboyant entrance in 2007, the interest for real-time ABC had fallen drastically in favor of tool-assisted super plays. The ABC was seen more as a puzzle than a test of skill. That changed when Bad Boot took on the task of beating the game with 70 stars in a single segment in as few A-presses as possible. This had never been attempted before. The only thing that came close was Chris Oldfield's 10 stars in no A-presses 16 years earlier, which was only marginally beaten by Japanese runner Altair with 12 stars in 2011. So much had improved since then, but on the other hand, so many techniques were incredibly precise and could never be replicated with human hands and a controller. Misalignments that require lining up with a 1x1 unit square. Cloning, which requires tons of object slot manipulation and precision. RNG and enemy manipulation, and any kind of hyperspeed technique, which were all decidedly off limits. The task was monumental, but Bad Boot was up to it. On September 24, 2017, he sat down and gave it his
Trying
best.
to do a live
He pressed
run
on
of
for
this
over
is
5
fucking
hours.
insane.
As always, time was very much a secondary concern.
No,
When
we're
Bad
not doing
Boot
the
defeated
rotate shit
final
again.
Bowser and
Thank you.
collected the giant star, his total A-press count read 46.
I'm glad we're not
He made a few
rotating up
mistakes along
a
the way.
stairway
He
again.
used 38 planned A-presses and 8 to retry sections where he fell. But overall, this was a surprisingly good first attempt and a very high bar for others to clear. A month later, Bad Boot gave it another solid shot. This time, he had refined his strategy a little bit. He got his planned A-press count down to 34 before the run. And it went even better than last time. He made 0 mistakes in the entire run. He did choose to add 1 A-press for Scale the Mountain instead of having to resort to the cloning strategy with the preset hope in Tiny Huge Island for his own sake. So after a bit less than 5 hours this time, Bad Boot had beaten Super Mario 64 with 70 stars and only 35 A-presses. This record was incredibly good. Although it obviously didn't include the most advanced TAS-only solutions, it still made use of cloning, start-end clip, frame walking, and plenty of crazy tricks. The run was so good that it stood as the 70-star record for years. Meanwhile, other players were interested in the individual star approach. The starting point was nearly 10 years old and well over 200 A-presses. The strategies had evolved beyond recognition in that time. With all this modern knowledge at hand, runners Billy War, Lord Sneck, The Real, Zion, Ivan178, and a few others, including Panenkoek himself, started chipping away at the count. They crossed the 200 mark in November 2019. 2020 saw the most activity, with the total dropping from 180 in March
So
to
they've been doing task
116
stuff for a while
in
now,
November.
but now they're trying to do it live.
Finally, the 100 barrier was broken on July 27th, 2021, and the
I
most
like that
recent
Luis
improvement
noticed that
from as
name as
recently
well.
December 12th, 2022 brought the A-press count
Lord
to
Sneck.
78. In the process, some truly incredible achievements were done, like the Pit and the Pendulums in only 3 A-presses using super precise platforming to climb up the clock and to grab the star. Somehow, this is not even the most impressive part of the run. To get off this bowl, Billy War sent a Bob-omb to a preset hope high up in the air so it would reactivate and fall on top of him, knocking him off the pole. Another impressive feat was pulling off the hyperspeed walking and jump dive in real time to get Watch for Rolling Rocks and Amazing Emergency Exit in 1 A-press each, done by Billy War and Ivan178. And perhaps even crazier,
He did a
hyperspeed
hyperspeed live?
merry-go-round in 0 A-presses, something that even Tassers only managed in 2015 using 10 hours of Scuttlebug racing. It was done in real time in August 2021 by Billy War using just a couple minutes of Scuttlebug raising and running into the Scuttlebug with a Crazy Box. Taking damage while holding a Crazy Box acts like instant release. It transports the box to the Hope laterally but at Mario's height. Using the hat-in-hand glitch prevents the Crazy Box from rendering and updating the Hope. By setting the Hope at the right location beforehand, Billy War sent the Crazy Box above the merry-go-round where it deactivated. After spawning the star, he reactivated the Crazy Box and managed to grab it before it would fall to the ground and break. He then bounced into the star, which completed the 0 A-press run. Sometimes the real-time ABC crew got very creative and found much simpler solutions than what Panenkoek had done years before. In the Deep Freeze was solved by Bad Boot when, to replace the TAS-only shell hyperspeed strategy, he simply lured a Spindrift and bounced on it. As far as full game runs go, the real-time ABC needed a bit of extra motivation. So Panenkoek announced a bounty in October 2020 for people to beat Bad Boot's 35. Panen was giving out $50 per A-press saved over the standing world record until the end of 2020. In the next couple of months, 3 players scrambled to get their A-press count lower. First came BRQM. On November 7th, he fired up a run with a route that would ideally get him 26
Okay, Fate, you want to pause?
I gotta figure out
a few
what
minor mistakes along the way,
No,
he
you
ended
don't
up
have to
in
pause.
Bowser in the Sky
Okay.
9 hours
Okay.
into the run with 24 A-presses. If he closed it out perfectly,
This is
he
so
could edge out the
fucking
record by
wild,
3.
though.
But he couldn't handle the pressure. All it took was one bad fall. Sadly, one fall turned into many, and frustration took over. He finished the run with 55. The
That
next
sucks.
day, Billy War, sprung from his work on individual stars, also set out to beat the record. His run went exceedingly well. He entered Bowser in the Sky after only 11 A-presses. He didn't choke in the most stressful part of the run. He closed it out in just 21 total A-presses.
21?
Actually, not quite. After failing the Star Dance clip to enter Hazymaze Cave, he had to reset to retry it, causing his A-press counter to lose 8 A-presses. His real total was actually 29.
29.
Still, he had beaten the record by 6 A-presses and achieved pretty much exactly what he had set out to do. At the end of November, a new runner by the name of Purple Juice Box entered the field. After a 9-hour effort, he managed to beat the record by another 3 A-presses. Again, the A-press counter is wrong because of a reset, this time due to technical difficulties. In December, Purple Juice Box continued to refine his strategies until the very end of the month. Meanwhile, BRQM was back with a vengeance. On December 27th, he did a run with an incredibly demanding 17 A-press route. He lost 6 along the way, but he was in Bowser in the Sky on a 23 A-press pace. But disaster struck again, and the record slipped from his hands once more. BRQM finished his run with 28 A-presses, just shy of the record. With less than 48 hours to go, on December 30th, Purple Juice Box was ready to take on another run, this time with a 21 A-press route. He executed it near flawlessly. Purple Juicebox beat Super Mario 64
Oh my
in
God.
4.5 hours using 22 A-presses. One single
know,
extra
his face
A-press was used at the start of Bowser in the Sky, and that is where the record stands today. The 120-star category was deemed a bit too daunting by the real-time ABC runners. It took until October 2021 for Billy Ward to take on the challenge.
Oh my
He
God,
put together a
Billy
route
is
that
going
would ideally
hard.
get 163 A-presses. He ended up scoring 53 over that, finishing out with 216. This record still stands. Finally, another category held the attention of real-time runners, max stars in 0 A-presses. Since Chris Oldfield's 10 in 2001 and Altair's 12 in 2011, so much had changed. Technically, up to 25 stars were now possible without Bowser in the Dark World, which was still TAS-only. Players battled in 2020 to get as close as possible to the maximum, a battle that was ultimately won by Zion on January 12, 2021 when he got all 25 possible stars and put this category to rest. Or so he thought. On February 16, 2022, Ivan178 completed Bowser in the Dark World with red coins in 0 A-presses in real time. Yes, that star with the VSC.
Sorry.
Yes,
Welcome back,
that star
Faye.
with the misalignment. Yes,
Hiya.
that star with the frame walking
Also-
up the seesaw platform. A month and a half later,
They
he would get
managed
34
to do
stars
that
and 0 A-presses
live.
thanks to the extra stars in the basement. To this day, Ivan178
Doing that
is still
fucking
the only player
misalignment
to
for the
complete
red
Bowser
coin
in the
star
Dark World
there.
in 0 A-presses in real time, and he has sole control over this record as a result. And this
My
is where
God.
the real-time A-button challenge is today. After being dormant for 10 years, a small community formed around it, and its members are still lowering the A-press count on a regular basis. March 2018. The first improvement of the year came in Jolly Roger Bay and was the result of slow incremental progress over many years by Pan and Koic, Tyler Caney, and Maria Nicolai. First, Mario frame walks up the pole to quickly gain a lot
Oh
of
my
sliding
God.
speed. Then he gains a little bit more on the bottom of the pole using a new technique called hyperspeed punching.
No.
Normally, if Mario's moving
Stop.
fast enough, pressing B will make him dive, but Mario can still punch at high speeds by using a slight control stick tilt on the frame he punches instead of a full tilt. During the punching action, Mario experiences a lower friction than usual. If he's standing on a steep enough slope, the downwards acceleration can overpower this unusually low friction, causing him to gain speed.
No.
Thanks to sliding speed conservation, he can reactivate that speed to quickly slide up the pole. Tyler Caney had the idea of using another punch to lose less speed while sliding up. The extra speed at the top of the pole combined with the precise dive proved to be just enough to reach the platform and save the A-press. Then, 2 months went by without any improvements. Time and effort were being poured into complex A-press saves, but nothing came to fruition for a while. Until the fateful night of May 26, 2018, when an unsuspecting speedrunner by the name of Andrew, after practicing movement in Bowser in the Fire Sea, decided to go to bed while leaving his console on overnight. The next morning, he found something strange. The platforms had
Left the
risen
console
from the
on
lava
overnight.
significantly. Over the
Kidding
next week,
me.
a mad dash ensued as the community tried to understand and replicate this. Everyone fired up their game and impatiently waited for something to happen in Bowser in the Fire Sea. Andrew was playing on Wii Virtual Console, which was immediately suspected as being relevant. It quickly became apparent that the suspicions were correct. Whatever caused the platforms to rise from the lava seemed to be unique to the Wii VC release. This made testing more inconvenient because emulators could not replicate the issue. Within just a few hours, Bad Boot had pinpointed the cause of the glitch. The Nintendo 64 console and emulators, when performing a specific operation on float numbers, round the result towards the nearest float number, whereas WiiVC truncates the float, effectively rounding the result towards 0. Because the platforms are at a negative Y value, as they
Oh my
bob up
God.
and down, their height ever so slightly drifts upwards. The problem is, for them to rise up enough to become useful for the A-button challenge, that rounding error needs to happen roughly 8 million times. This takes about 3 days of real time.
3 days!
Multiple excited community members such as Emilia, Barry, Wanted59, and Switch Palace Corner began live streaming on Twitch as they left their Wii on for days, watching the platforms rise up like grass growing. Despite both technical and skill issues leading to multiple failures, one thing became very clear: this new glitch worked. The rest of the stage was a bit different now that the other sinking platforms, also drifting towards 0, had sunk completely through the floor, leaving a very inhospitable Fire Sea. But Panin had no issue navigating that thanks to the safe zone on the edges. The very last A-Press in 70 Star was finally solved. Super Mario 64 was beatable without using the A button. The solution to get off the pole in Bowser in the Fire Sea was to bypass the pole entirely. After just a couple of days, Daneboo made a modified version of Mupen 64 that replicated the rounding error found in Wii VC, so Panenkoek was able to make a proper task. To get the red coins, he simply entered the Bowser fight to reset the platforms back to normal, then used the regular strategy found in 2014. Of course, this A-Press save came with a massive caveat. Again, it was exclusive to Wii. The achievement of solving the A-button challenge completely for 70 Star felt a little hollow because it was abusing a glitch only present in an inaccurate emulated re-release. This also brought Wii VC back on par with Japanese Nintendo 64 for 120 Star since there were now 2 different A-Press saves unique to each version that cancelled out. But the tie wouldn't last very long. Just 3 weeks later, with help from Bad Boot to figure things out, and from Panenkoek to string everything together, Tyler Keeney unveiled the most off-the-wall insane ABC achievement yet, entering the secret aquarium in 0 A-Presses without parallel universes.
Without the parallel universes? What the fuck?
Before we begin, I want to mention that this next section is heavily based on the excellent video on Bad Boot's channel about this A-Press save. The known strategy to enter the secret aquarium had one simple problem. To get from here to there, Mario needs more speed than he can possibly have and still be able to get from here to here. With PU speed not being an option, there had to be another solution.
This is so fucking absurd. That solution
was the glitchy ledge grab. No, not that glitchy ledge grab, the other kind. If you remember, to determine if Mario should grab a ledge, the game checks for a wall of 2 points, 30 units and 150 units above Mario's position. On the staircase leading to Bowser in the Sky, there are 2 ledges next to each other. The game checked for a wall of the lower ledge, then checked for a floor of the higher ledge. This type of glitchy ledge grab is a bit different. The wall below the ledge of the secret aquarium is ever so slightly tilted. Between the points at 30 and 150 units,
Mario went to parallel universes for a bit.
1/4 of a unit. So there's a gap of the same size where the wall check finds a wall at 30 units but not at 150 units, which triggers the floor check for a ledge grab. Like we've seen before, this check can find the floor all the way up to 238 units above Mario's position, allowing Mario to grab the ledge from a lower height. But how much lower? Well, enough to make coming in from this location viable. And that was all they needed to solve the puzzle. Well, not quite. There was just one simple problem. Sure, Mario could get from here to there with a lower speed than before, but there's no way to accurately guide Mario directly to the right spot below the ledge with such high speed. The angle required is simply unattainable with that amount of speed. Thankfully, sitting right there is the perfect way to redirect Mario to an arbitrary angle, a text box.
Oh my god.
Text boxes preserve Mario's speed, but once the text is cleared, he can turn to face any angle instantly, redirecting that speed to the new angle. This, along with precise speed and positioning in front of the door, does allow Mario to grab the ledge. But there was one simple problem. This text box is only here if Mario doesn't have enough stars to open the door.
I think they need to
Mario must have
relearn.
0 stars. It turns out this simple problem is a major issue because it rules out hyperspeed walking in Hazy Maze
about that.
I don't think that they understand the word
cave requires
simple
getting a star
much.
from Nips, which also only shows up if Mario already has 15
They don't do
stars.
simple.
If Mario can't enter Hazy Maze Cave, he can't carry infinite speed into the castle lobby.
Yay.
What other level could be used? Well, not many. With 0 stars, only Bob-omb Battlefield is accessible. There's also a way to reach Vanish Cap under the moat, but that one turns out not to be very helpful.
Nothing.
Within Bob-omb
Simple about what they've been
Shell
doing.
Hyperspeed immediately comes to mind. But there's just one simple problem. The shell isn't available until after getting stars 1 and 2 in the level, so it can't be used. Instead, C-up sliding saves the day. As a refresher, when C-up is pressed on a downward slope, Mario slides to a stop, but the slope overpowers the friction from sliding, resulting in a net acceleration. This is enough for Mario to gain over 200 speed. From there, Tyler Keeney was able to bounce Mario to a tree and pause exit, which conserves Mario's sliding speed. However, 230 speed is nowhere near the 900 or so required for Secret Aquarium. Instead, it's used to send Mario to Bowser in the Dark World without the required 8 stars. The first key can be obtained, and the basement is now unlocked. In the basement, 2 more levels are accessible, Lethal Lava Land and Shifting Sand Land. Let's turn our attention towards the latter. In here, Shell Hyperspeed could generate a few hundred speed, but again, it's not enough. This time, Hyperspeed punching saves the day. In this corner of Shifting Sand Land, the visual geometry doesn't match the actual level geometry. Everything in this zone is out of bounds. When Mario stands here and punches, he accelerates forwards but stays in place because he's attempting to move out of bounds. So long as he punches frame perfectly, he can build up infinite speed in this corner. However, there's one simple problem.
This is how people end up in the back rooms.
He immediately and instantly loses all but 32 speed. Thankfully, by pressing Z at the right time, Mario starts sliding instead, which does conserve his speed. For 1 frame at least. After 1 frame, Mario's sliding speed is capped to 100. But sliding also turns Mario slightly. With the right angle, this can turn Mario towards a valid position in bounds. After 1 frame, Mario ends up in the corner of the level, which happens to have a lower floor than the hyperspeed punching spot. So, Mario enters freefall and gets to keep his high speed. And now he gets to face several problems. First of all, with 45,000 speed, Mario's going way too fast. The target speed here is on the order of 2,000. Secondly, he's also headed face first towards out of bounds while in the air, so he's about to bonk. Last but not least, even if he could get out of this spot, Mario needs a way to conserve his sliding speed into the castle lobby through a pause exit. Solving all 3 problems was a stroke of pure genius from Tyler Caney and Bad Boot. The first problem was solved with a Koopa Shell clone. A shell clone functions like a normal shell, except that the clone stays in place and Mario rides an invisible shell. It can also be reused. In fact, it's used 3 different times in this level. The shell was used here for an important property. If Z is pressed while Mario is riding a shell, he starts crouch sliding. Again, there's one small problem. This doesn't work if Mario is airborne. But thankfully, on the first frame where Mario is on the shell, the game doesn't check for that condition and Mario can press Z to crouch slide despite being in the air. So with 1 extra frame of sliding, another trick could be used to bring the speed down to a workable value, the 10K glitch. When the control stick is pulled back while Mario is sliding, a multiplier is applied to his speed to slow him down. The multiplier is meant to slow Mario down slightly more drastically the faster he's moving, so it follows this formula. More specifically, for every 10,000 speeds Mario has, the multiplier goes down by 1. So if Mario has a speed in the tens of thousands or higher, this formula can yield very interesting results.
Stop using simple. You don't understand what the word simple means.
It's used to instantly bring Mario's speed from 45,000 down to only 2,000. But there is, you guessed it, one simple problem. For Mario to land on the Koopa Shell, he needs to fall down on it. Although he's in free fall, he hasn't started falling down yet. But if he spends 1 more frame in the air, he will bonk instead. Mario needs something to fall without bonking. Enter the Fire Clone. When Mario is burning in the air and moving towards out of bounds, he keeps his speed but falls straight down. From there, he can land on the shell clone, crouch to start sliding, pull the control stick back to activate the 10K glitch and bring his speed down to 2,000. But then what? He still has no way of conserving that speed through a pause exit, and by the way, he's still headed face first into out of bounds. This is where the final piece of this puzzle comes in, a Fly Guy. With this lower speed, Mario can move for 1/4 step before bonking. On the frame that he bonks, his speed doesn't get killed immediately, only on the next frame does it get set to -16. However, the bonk is cancelled by landing on the Fly Guy before the speed is capped, so Mario's speed ends up being conserved and he starts twirling. After that, he can wait until the perfect moment to land and pause exit on the first frame to conserve his speed into the castle lobby. But there was one
Now for the long answer. Good.
How do you get all this stuff in the corner like that? The short answer is cloning and Fly Guy manipulation. Now for the long answer. The Fly Guy is nothing we haven't seen before. The annoying ones are the Fire Clone and the Koopa Shell. The shell can be found in this block, which would be
turned on by intelligent people. I think it understand what's
star 3, so on 0 stars, there's no tornado here. Instead, the only method to get the shell is to open the box remotely and clone the shell. This can be done with a preset hope from another level, namely Bob-omb Battlefield. It just so happens that the perfect location for this is on the floating island, so to get the hope there, Mario needs to clone a Goomba and use the bloated Bob-omb glitch. No big deal so far. After placing the hope, Mario can then fall onto the slippery slope, get 200 speed, and clip into Bowser in the Dark World with the preset hope. Now an issue. When Mario fights Bowser for the key, he needs to grab Bowser, which automatically updates the hope. There's no such thing as hat in hand here, and instant release, while seemingly promising at first glance, doesn't actually work in this case. But remember, the hope updates when the game needs to draw the object Mario is holding. If we can't make Bowser invisible, what if we made Mario invisible? It turns out that we can, using pause buffered hit stun. After taking damage, Mario is invincible for 30 frames or until he's no longer colliding with the source of damage. This blinking during those invincibility frames is determined by the global timer, a timer that simply goes up by 1 on every frame from power on. If this timer is even, Mario will be visible, and if it's odd, Mario will be invisible. The global timer doesn't stop when the game is paused, so it is possible to only unpause the game while the global timer is odd, causing Mario to remain invisible during the invincibility frames. In that short time, he can grab and release objects without updating the hope. This is pause buffered hit stun. After all this work, Mario enters Shifting Sand Land with the hope intact. Again, the hat in hand glitch is unavailable because the wing cap requires 10 stars and Klepto is too busy carrying a star around to steal Mario's hat. So pause buffered hit stun has to be used to perform the remote releases. First, a Bob-omb is thrown to the hope where it deactivates. Then another Bob-omb is used for cloning. When Mario gets near the high Bob-omb, it falls down and breaks the box, spawning the Koopa shell which Mario clones. He walks all the way to this spot to release it and uses it to get around faster. Then, this fly guy is manipulated while the other fly guy is lured into spitting fire for Mario to clone. Pause buffered hit stun had to be used extensively here. Mario stays inside of the Poké to extend his invincibility period until he can walk up the slope. When the fly guy spits fire, Mario clones it and drops it at the hope laterally but at Mario's height, which places the fire clone just above the Koopa shell clone. Then, Pan and Quick finishes the fly guy manipulation and everything is now in place. Mario crouches, which turns him. He gets burned so not to blow.
Every part of this game is getting broken and manipulated for the sake of not pressing it yes.
To trigger the 10k glitch and instantly bring Mario's speed to 2000. He bonks but cancels that bonk before his speed is capped, sending him into a twirl at 2300 speed.
Excuse me?
Okay, the hard part now!
Now that Mario is in the lobby with 2000 speed, here comes the easy part. Just kidding, it's actually the hard part.
Yay!
First, one thing to keep in mind is that high-speed movement is very limited. Mario can only turn by up to 1/32 of a turn or about 11 degrees in a single frame. This severely hinders movement options. Unlike when traveling at PU speed, where most of the possible positions would be out of bounds anyway, Mario doesn't have the liberty of choosing which angle he wants to move in next. He sort of always has to hug the walls. The other major limitation is floor hitboxes, which only extend 78 units below the floors. This means that in any single quarter step, Mario can only ever move up to 78 units upwards. That's why he can't just go up the central staircase normally. For the final glitchy ledge grab to work, Mario needs about 920 speed, but to get up the central staircase, he can have at most about 500 speed. Instead, he will need to come at it sideways from as high as possible. The lobby movement, again solved by Tyler Caney, can be subdivided into 5 main sections. Entering the Jolly Roger Bay room, landing on this pillar, reaching the 8-star door, reaching the 1-star door, and finally, grabbing the secret aquarium ledge. Let's go through them one by one. The first part is reaching the Jolly Roger Bay room, which is quite a bit higher. First, Mario's stored speed sends him into the Whomp's Fortress room where he has to carefully turn around and navigate back to the main lobby. After reaching this staircase, Mario needs to zigzag up to gain height in small enough increments. The geometry of this area just barely allows it to work. If the stairs had one more step, or if Mario needed slightly more speed, going up this staircase would have been impossible. Once in the Jolly Roger Bay room, Mario is now at the highest point he can be before heading towards the central staircase. However, he can't go directly to the staircase because at this angle, he would shoot past it and into the Bob-omb Battlefield room. Instead, he has to aim at the pillar next to the staircase. The pillar is 77 units higher than the floor Mario is currently on, so he has a grand total of 1.5 frames to reach it. This is why, despite only needing 900 speed at the end, Mario needs to have 1700 speed at this point. In order to reach the pillar, Tyler aimed Mario towards the railing. On this frame, Mario's next intended position after one quarter step is right here, less than 1 unit inside of it. The railing is 51 units wide, so there's a 1 unit gap where only the outside wall affects Mario, allowing him to get pushed by it. He gets pushed into the pillar's wall hitbox, but the wall check is over, so he doesn't get affected by it right away. Then, because Mario is inside the floor hitbox, he gets pushed up to it and lands. This sequence works because the game treats collision checks in the order of walls first, floors second, and ceilings last. Tyler dives here and does a dive recover on the pillar for a very specific reason. When Mario lands from that dive recover, he can instantly turn. By turning in this direction, he now tries to move into a ceiling, which leaves him stuck in place, allowing him to let his speed come down to 1100 for the next section. But during the dive recover, he needs something to keep him in place. That thing is the other railing. Mario's first quarter step leads him in the railing, which has 2 overlapping opposite wall hitboxes that cancel each other out. So after this double wall push, Mario's position is inside of a ceiling, which not only prevents him from moving there, but also negates his vertical speed. If he did get vertical speed from the dive recover, Mario would have caught the top of the railing and fallen off. Once Mario's speed drops down to 1100, he's ready to head to the 8-star door. He spends 1 frame on the staircase, which lowers his de facto speed just enough to avoid falling off. Then he manages to turn towards the star door and trigger the text as far left as possible. This is important for the next section. After closing the text, Mario can now redirect his speed in any direction. Because he's on the left side of the door, he has a near direct line to the 1-star door, which he reaches in 3 frames. He needs to trigger that text with a very precise speed and position, so he waits some speed out and then clips inside of the princess's secret slide room to realign himself. Then Tyler makes use of a neat high-speed trick to redirect Mario towards the door. If Mario is pushing up against the wall and C up is pressed, Mario will instantly face directly at the wall. With high negative speed, this causes him to shoot away from the wall perpendicularly, no matter his prior facing angle. This leads him into the door's text box. Again, after closing it out, Mario can redirect his speed, this time towards the secret aquarium entrance. All that's left is to perfectly aim at the quarter unit gap and do a glitchy ledge grab. And there it was, entering the secret aquarium with 0 A presses, compatible with the Nintendo 64 console.
What the fuck?
After this enormous achievement, the A-Button Challenge community could sit back and relax. For a while, nothing really happened. Alright, that's enough. What if we save 2 A presses this time?
Sure.
More hyperspeed. We're at more hyperspeed now.
Boot, Sydney and Tyler Caney.
I want someone to hyperspeed grind all over me. I'll be honest with that.
Alright,
hyperspeed grinding. It requires a specific spot where a bit of steep floor is next to a gap in the floor and the wall. Mario runs off the steep floor,
yeah, have a good rest era. Thank you for stopping by.
The pushes him back, and the stick is held back towards the floor, so he lands. This cycle is repeated for as long as
Don't worry about it, Luis.
Because of the landing frame, Mario's speed is normally kept in check by friction, and he can't accelerate beyond the normal speed cap of 32. But if the floor is steep enough, Mario has no friction when landing, so he can build up speed to a certain degree. Because of limitations with geometry, this method can be used to build up to roughly 400 speed at best. Despite that, it could still prove useful, so long as there existed a spot that filled all the requirements and ticked off clock. This is where Sydney came in and found the edge of this treadmill. Here, it works slightly differently. Mario's getting a push from 2 wall hitboxes at once, which combine to send him back on the treadmill if he lands. After gathering enough speed, Mario can do a hyper-speed jump and reach the next level in a single A-press instead of 2. Finally, Tyler Caney executed the strategy to save the A-press, and Pan & Koek, as always, strung everything together. He published The Pit and the Pendulums in 1 A-press, and timed jumps on moving bars from 3 down to 2 A-presses. Stomp on the Thwomp, the only other star higher than this, still used a pedal spot strategy, so no other A-press could be saved with this new trick. As soon as hyperspeed grinding was proven possible though, an alternate strategy for timed jumps on moving bars was revisited. Over the years, many alternate methods were found that completed stars in the same amount of A-presses but with wildly different routes, sometimes faster, sometimes not. One of these was for timed jumps on moving bars. Instead of using a bob-omb to reach the roll into the cage star and then 2 A-presses to get up to the timed bars, one could instead use 3 A-presses to reach the timed bars and repurpose the bob-omb to clip into the final cage instead of jumping to it. A way to get up the cogs without the Bob-omb was theorized but never actually accomplished because both amounted to 4 A-presses in total or 3 with pendulum manipulation. But with the discovery of hyperspeed grinding, suddenly where the original route saved 1 A-press, the alternate route saved 2. So the alternate method became the main one. But first they had to actually get up these cogs, not just think about it. The problem doesn't actually lie within the cogs themselves, but with this platform, which is slightly too high to just dive recover to, given that it's not oriented properly for a misalignment to exist. But with enough conserved vertical speed, it would be possible to grab the ledge. They just needed to land on the cog with positive vertical speed and get pushed off at the right time to reactivate that speed. Piece of cake. On the random setting, cogs spin back and forth like this. As they rotate, their wall hitboxes move around as well, creating openings on the corners from time to time.
Oh my god.
More specifically, there's a misalignment on the corner found in this region of the cog because this section points away from the origin. This is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because a misalignment makes it possible for Mario to land on the cog with positive vertical speed. It's a curse because this spot seemed just out of reach. It wasn't just that Mario needed to land there, he needed to get there with enough vertical speed to grab the ledge afterwards. Using mathematical models and calculations, the Rock Project and Sydney ended up finding that yes, this strategy was indeed just barely possible. The cog's wall on the previous frame could be used to help Mario get increased distance to reach the misalignment. Using their guidance, Pan&Koek was able to task it and the route was complete. The rest stayed relatively unchanged until the end, hyperspeed grinding to get up here in 1 A-press, then pendulum manipulation to save another. But then the Bob-omb they repurposed falls down from way above and Mario grabs it bloated to clip into the cage. The Hope was placed in Bowser in the Sky beforehand, and the Bob-omb was released at the Hope using
going into deep math.
Just 2 weeks after being brought to 2 A-presses, time jumps on moving bars was already down to just 1. 2 months later, on September 26, 2018, Stomp on the Thumb underwent a revolution when a new petrol spot was found here. Well, actually, the petrol spot itself was already known to exist, but no one knew how to get Mario lodged in there like that. Until DS273 found a way to knock Mario into the petrol spot without an A-press using pendulum manipulation and a Bob-omb.
Oh my god.
5 A-press route, the one with 4 A-presses at the start and 1 hyperspeed jump dive, went flying out of the window. Instead, it was replaced with this. The beginning is basically the same as
the fucking pendulum in the back.
Only the Hope is in a slightly different position. Then, 2 different RNG manipulations are done at the same time, pendulum manipulation and the rotating clock hand at the top of the stage. Pendulum manipulation is used to make the pendulum end the spin here. This is actually nearly a full rotation, so when it swings back, it swings upwards to return to angle 0. This lodges Mario in the ceiling and reactivates the Bob-omb, which falls on top of him and knocks him onto the pendulum's box. This allows Mario to turn towards a suitable angle for what comes next. When the pendulum swings back around, the shaft pushes Mario off the pendulum box and into the pedal spot. Once Mario is in the pedal spot, he builds up to over 600 speed and jumps out of the spot, instantly landing on the floor above. To preserve his vertical speed, he instantly pushes C up to enter first person. Otherwise, the landing would instantly bring his speed to 0. Then he punches repeatedly until he leaves this platform, where the conserved speed sends him flying upwards. He lands directly on the clock hand. This is why RNG was being manipulated before. After getting on the hand in 2 A-presses, all that was needed was to wait for it to make 3/4 of a turn and jump on a thwomp to get the star in 3. This saved 2 A-presses at once for the second time in a couple of months.
Oh my god.
Pan&Koek and crew were not satisfied. The pedal spot could on paper give enough vertical speed to Mario to reach all the way up to the star. The problem though was how disjointed the pedal spot was from the thwomp. While Mario could jump all the way up to the star, he couldn't cross the horizontal distance in that time since having to resort to VSC to get past this platform killed all of his forward momentum. The solution they found was double VSC. The route is mostly the same up to this point. This time, Mario builds up almost 700 speed, which gives him a little bit more vertical momentum. Once he shoots off this platform, he lands on the clock hand by having it turn under him. Pressing C up on the frame Mario lands preserves his vertical
behind
speed
making
on
this
top of stopping him on a dive.
Stars.
Then the hand rotates towards the thwomp, and Mario releases the remaining vertical speed to land on it and save yet another A-press.
Jesus Christ.
The highest star in the toughest stage for the A-button challenge was down to only 2 A-presses. But hold on, clock hands are supposed to move clockwise. That's quite literally the definition of clockwise. How does the hand turn backwards like that? The answer is RNG manipulation, and a lot of it. The problem though is that once Mario enters the pedal spot, there's no longer a way to manipulate RNG. So, before getting into the pedal spot, Pan & Coex spent an extra 9 minutes manipulating the hand so it would turn counterclockwise by a third of a turn. Despite being on the random setting, the clock hands still favor moving clockwise. If you let the clock run without interference long enough though, the clock hand will eventually turn by this much counterclockwise. The only problem is it typically takes on the order of weeks. That's not ideal.
Ugh.
So, Pan & Coex wrote a program that simulated the clock on the random
Bowser.
setting.
I'm gonna make him go, what the fuck, man, while I'm at it.
So that 12 minutes later, the clock hand would move exactly the way he wanted. His script found dozens of solutions, and Pan simply picked one of the more convenient ones. 2018 turned into 2019. The community was as active and dedicated as ever to find Apress saves, but they were getting exponentially harder to come by. Even TikTok,
but you're not already outside the box!
17 Apresses not that long ago had seriously dried up and was down to only 8. It was time to think outside the box. What if instead of trying to remove Apresses from the total, they started adding them back? This is Get a Hand, up from 0 to 0.5 Apresses. If you've been following, you might know where this is going. First, adding a half Apress in TikTok clock doesn't hurt. It's assumed that the star would come after entering the level for the first time, an action that still incurred an Apress. Second, the half Apress is useful here because it allows Mario to kick, which in turn lets him fall down with backwards momentum. This sets things up for spawning displacement. There's one major issue though. The previous spawning displacement was achieved on the pit and the pendulums, which is directly above and very much above Get a Hand. Despite that, Mario has barely enough speed to land on the lowest of the spinners. If Mario were to kick the wall and get this star, he'd be way short of the spinners. This one was solved by DS273. The problem with kick recoil momentum is that the speed Mario inherits is a fixed -48. But the ABC crew figured out that while it's true that Mario's speed can't be changed, speed isn't the only way to move Mario. He can also get pushed by walls. If Mario finds himself inside of a wall hitbox, because the hitbox is 50 units wide on each side, he can theoretically get pushed by double that, or 100 units perpendicularly to that wall. Now, because the ABC experts were trying to push Mario in the same direction as his movement, that proved to be a bit tricky because Mario would need to enter the wall from behind for this to work. But thanks to pendulum manipulation, it was possible to have the wall itself move into Mario instead. Unfortunately, even that wall push ended up being too weak to move Mario enough to reach the spinners, by a factor of 10. That idea was not gonna work. It was tough enough to get Mario to get pushed by a wall in the right direction once, let alone 10 times, until DS273 had a new idea. The pendulum is made up of many tiny triangles to give the illusion of a round shape. As it turns out, in this specific spot, many different triangles converge into a single point. Theoretically, if Mario ended up exactly on that point, he could technically be inside of all of these triangles wall hitboxes at once. Like we've seen before, when Mario is in multiple wall hitboxes at the same time, he receives a combined push from
That's a lot of triangles.
So, if Mario ended up inside of all of these walls, he could get a wall push from each of these triangles. And how many triangles is that? 10 triangles. The path forward was clear. The goal was to get Mario in this point in the star fall action with kick recoil momentum. Then he would get a massive push from 10 walls at once and move just barely far enough to star dance clip onto the spinner. Now the question was, how do you get Mario in there? Well, the answer was not easy.
Oh my god.
Unlike floors, wall collisions do use floating point numbers, so the point where these 10 triangles converge is one single floating point number, or 0.000025 units wide. Also, for all 10 triangles to be walls at the same time, the pendulum needs to be at a very specific angle, so extensive manipulation was also required. The point itself was also a little bit too high. Mario somehow needed to kick the wall from slightly higher than this platform. That wasn't enough to discourage DS273. Here's the route that he came up with and that Pan & Coex successfully tasked afterwards. First, there needs to be a carefully preset hope. Tal Mountain can be used to do just that. Next, Pan uses instant release to send 2 bob-bombs at the hope laterally, but at slightly different heights. This is so they can be reactivated later in very specific positions. Then, after climbing up to the turning hand, Panon manipulates the pendulum for 18 minutes
There's so much math,
rotations. He reactivates the first Bob-omb, which he wants to grab. Since he has to hold A to kick later on, he can't just grab it normally, so he has to use the ledge to dive grab it instead. He grabs it slightly bloated, which gives Mario a weak backwards push. Then, he reactivates the second Bob-omb so that it snaps to Mario's position and explodes, pushing him through the wall. He normally wouldn't be able to stand in there, but here he can for two reasons. First, objects like Bob-ombs can push Mario into positions that he normally wouldn't be able to reach by himself, like inside ceilings or out of bounds. We've seen this twice before in Stomp on the Thwomp. Second, this area is not out of bounds because there's a floor directly below. It's inside of a ceiling which traps Mario in midair but doesn't immediately kill him like out of bounds would. The swinging pendulum passes by and Mario can walk on it, which ever so slightly moves him upwards to the correct vertical position for the float-precise wall push. Then he keeps moving inside of the ceiling thanks to the Bob-omb pushing him around until he gets to a fraction of a unit behind the wall, the perfect spot for the final part. The inputs in RNG to get to this point required brute forcing to reach the exact values needed. Now, all Panon can do is wait. When the pendulum is about to turn into the exact angle that yields the float-precise 10 triangle overlap, Mario kicks and starts moving backwards. He enters the wall hitbox and gets clipped back in bounds. His kick collides with the wall on the same frame that he touches the star. Then he inherits -48 speed and the pendulum turns into him. He enters the float-precise point where 10 wall hitboxes coincide. In a single frame, he gets pushed 1,000 units backwards, which happens to be just barely enough to start dance clip at the very bottom of the spinner. Finally, one small bit of RNG manipulation before this whole ordeal ensured that at this precise moment, the spinner would start spinning clockwise and provide spawning displacement to save the re-entry.
Holy shit!
All 120 stars were now obtainable in 19 A-presses. The ABC crew had done it. The whole game was under 20. The A-Button Challenge had completed its 22-year transition from a fun little distraction in the corner of an RC chat to the most convoluted and well-researched video game puzzle of all time. As complex and difficult the new A-Press saves had become, it was worth the effort. With the community as large as ever, filled with talented experts working together tirelessly, the sky was the limit. But despite so many technical advancements, no discovery that came after this ever directly helped. The A-Press count remained frozen at 19. Months became years. Ultimately, still sitting at 7 A-Presses by itself, TikTok Clock had 1. In 2022, the A-Press count is still 19.
Was the answer?
Wait, whoa, hold up.
What is all of this?
You're not gonna just gloss over that number right there.
July 6, 2022. The ABC community finally unveils not 1, not 2, but 3 A-Press saves at the same time, all of them in TikTok Clock. Of the hundreds of A-Presses once needed to collect all the stars, only 16 remain.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Though it seemed that the ABC had been dormant for
Vinny, stop just saying, oh my god!
I'm sorry,
I been in the making for years. In fact, ever since 2016, there was one leading
the limit of all fucking
only 1 A-Press.
After seeing
all commentary from Danny says, oh my god!
It was a very simple
I'm just sitting here like, how in the actual fuck did they manage to find more saves in this fucking level?
The idea involved the old Pedro spot strategy. That method was stunted by having to enter the level while the clock is still, which made reaching the Pedro spot so much more inconvenient than what a moving clock could provide. So what if instead the Pedro spot could be used while the clock was on the random setting? Theoretically, through the magic of RNG manipulation, the cog could stay in place for long enough that Mario could build up all the speed he needed to jump straight up to the thwomp at the top of the clock. But here's the small problem. To stay still for so long, assuming purely random conditions, the cog needed to roll 1 in 7 chance 1,200 times. Simply finding a solution that worked would take longer than the heat death of the universe.
Nice!
There were a few redeeming elements that made the actual odds slightly better. Eversange made a detailed analysis of the probabilities with a more optimistic outlook and found that the odds were much better than Panenkoek's initial calculation. Specifically, he found that once Mario has enough speed, the cog can turn by some tiny amount without breaking the pedal spot. But regardless of how you spin it, the improbability of the strategy outscaled the number of possibilities that could be tested by dozens of orders of magnitude. So while the random cog pedal spot idea was alluring in its simplicity, it was impossibly intimidating in its execution. It remained in limbo for over 6 years, waiting for something to be found that would make it computable. But that never happened. Instead, it was its competing idea, a much more complex one on the surface, that prevailed in July.
So when is this group going to make functional warp drives?
To get some context on the discoveries that led to the improvements,
God damn, I feel like they could, actually.
Tyler, Caney, and Batboot were brainstorming strategies to get past Eppola and Bowser in the Fire Sea on console. During their research, they found a promising and peculiar trick that stems from a very obscure interaction: Squish Cancel. When a ceiling and a floor are close together, Mario can't quite fit in that spot. This is the mechanic that makes pedal spots what they are. However, if at least one of them is dynamic, in other words, if it belongs to an object, Mario will get squished instead. Now, if at least one of the surfaces involved in the squish happens to be very slanted, by more than 60 degrees, as Mario is getting squished, he also gets pushed off by 10 units. If that push happens to be enough to take him off the floor he's on, then he suddenly finds himself squished by nothing in midair. To prevent that, on the next quarter step, his action state is set to idle instead. Finally, on the next frame, Mario can either do an action like a jump from that state, or he simply enters freefall. The reason this was so promising is that Squish Cancel happens to preserve Mario's horizontal speed while it resets his action back to idle. But there's also an unexpectedly useful side effect: it also zeroes out Mario's vertical speed. Ultimately, the goal was to use this in combination with high-speed collisions with bullies, but there were missing pieces to the puzzle, and despite all their best efforts for years and years, this idea could never be fully realized. A few months later, in August 2018, a tasser by the name of Super Watermelon 64 was playing around in Jolly Roger Bay when he encountered a very odd glitch. Mario could dive twice for seemingly no reason. This turned out to be the accidental discovery of remote Squish Cancel. If you remember, ceilings extend up infinitely until there's a floor above them. Sometimes, due to imperfect geometry or rounding errors, a ceiling that's supposed to have a floor above it has a tiny sliver that
remote squish canceling?
This exposed ceiling stretches infinitely upward and causes what's commonly called an invisible wall. If the exposed ceiling happens to have a floor immediately under it and one of them is part of an object, then all the requirements are met to squish Mario, even though he's far higher than the game would expect him to be. When Mario is squished, he instantly downwarps to the floor below him. But if there's a steep slope and Mario gets pushed out, his action is set to idle instead. From that point, he can jump or enter freefall again while preserving his speed. Because all of this happens way above the place that would actually squish Mario, this is known as remote Squish Cancel. Immediately, Batboot found that under perfect conditions, the pendulums in Tick-Tock Clock could fulfill the requirements to enable Mario to perform a remote Squish Cancel. At the time, nothing concrete was found to have it directly save an A-press, but it was one more tool in the box. The other trick that was found during that time, though, was much more evidently groundbreaking. On May 1st, 2021, DS273 published a discovery of Behind Camera Anywhere. Behind Camera Anywhere, or BCA for short, is a surprisingly simple trick. At any given time, the camera has a focus point. Now you'd think that focus point should be Mario, but as it turns out, that would look a bit odd and annoying. Instead, the camera is looking at a constantly evolving point that's roughly this much ahead of where Mario's looking. Now if you lock the camera in place, the focus point will still behave as normal. If Mario goes really close to the camera, the focus point in front of him can end up on the other side. The camera always looks at the focus point, therefore Mario can end up behind the camera so long as he's looking in the right direction. To save on resources, anything that isn't in the current field of view of the camera isn't being rendered, because it wouldn't be on screen anyway. That's true even of Mario himself. If he's far enough behind the camera, then he no longer gets rendered. And you know what that means.
Oh my
god,
no.
If Mario isn't being rendered, then whatever he's holding also isn't being rendered, so the hope does not get updated. That's right, Behind Camera Anywhere is yet another hole preservation method, adding to the hat-in-hand glitch, instant release, and pause buffered hitstun.
Jesus Christ, how many of these methods are there?
Mario needs to grab and release an object, all while keeping himself behind and his focus point in front of the static camera. That's a pretty restrictive situation that effectively prevents moving around with the object and also limits Mario's facing angle during the trick. Nonetheless, Behind Camera Anywhere would prove extremely useful.
The fucking camera's like, and moving away for something fun to happen off camera.
But most importantly, GCA
and now for something you'll all enjoy.
TikTok clock. Combined with remote squish cancel
Mr.
and
Conway,
3,000 hours of this discovery led to the 3 A+ series of TikTok clock 14 months later. The idea boils down to solving one problem, getting past this section of the level with no A presses. The stars, the pit, and the pendulums, time jumps on moving bars, and stomp on a thwomp all rely on clearing this section. The existing method bypassed the whole thing in one A press with hyperspeed grinding. To go from one to none,
I love that hyperspeed grinding is a very prevalent thing.
It can be broken down into 3 steps.
Fuck yeah, it's prevalent.
First, crossing this gap, which has been solved for years using a bloated bob-omb. Second, getting up to here, which can be done with a dive recovery into a fire clone in a star.
Hell yeah.
And finally, dismounting the pole,
yeah.
with another conveniently placed fire clone. And that's it.
Okay.
With just these 3
steps,
I'm
gonna end
the
up
whole
doing.
section is cleared in no A
Speaking of hyperspeed grinding. Speaking of hyperspeed grinding.
To look at each individual problem within a level and find the solution that misses the bigger picture. This is one of those.
Maybe
the
play Sonic Adventure
looks
2.
like a great solution, but it actually isn't. It's all because this gap already uses a star
still thinking of games to play when she has a PC.
100 coin star at once.
Yes, because I have that.
You somehow need 2.
And I can mod it.
This is where DS273 came up with an absolutely crazy plan that could, in theory, get rid of this star dance clip. But it was a bit of a lunatic idea that had no business actually being possible. Until a newcomer, SJMHRP, jumped into the problem first. She created various programs to search for the one perfect alignment of stars that allowed DS's insane plan to work. This task was astronomical. But after 1,000 hours of work over 8 months and after over 10,000 computational hours to search through billions of permutations of conditions, she found the solution. Sit down, buckle up, and put your helmet on.
Now you want us to put on a helmet? What the fuck?
Mario rides a pendulum into the ceiling. He gets squished and burned, then repeatedly ground pounds to gain height, all the way up until he grabs the ledge at the top. Finally, he pulls a bob-omb out of his pocket and uses it to cross the gap. That's it. That's how it's done. And now we need to spend 20 minutes understanding
what was that cryptic nonsense?
Thank you. Thank you.
The first step of this ordeal is to manipulate the pendulum. It needs to reach a very specific state, so a total of 61 minutes of manipulation is required to do so. After this much manipulation, it's now spinning so fast that it does 50 full rotations per swing. But it's not just the speed that's important, it's also the exact angles that the pendulum will be taking at various times a couple dozen frames apart. Next, Mario rides the pendulum up into the ceiling. Normally, he should get squished, but there's a 10-unit gap where Mario is stuck in the ceiling without being squished. So long as Mario keeps walking, he stays stuck in that ceiling. If he stops walking, he falls down. So after a few minutes of waiting for the pendulum to reach the correct state, Mario falls back down and gets carried up into the ceiling. This happens because collisions are processed in the order of walls, floors, and ceilings. Mario snaps up to the pendulum before the ceiling has anything to say about it. Also, Mario doesn't take damage because he goes from being lightly squished straight to being fully inside of the ceiling in a single frame. Now, Mario shouldn't be able to move around anything. The pendulum provides a floor for him to stand on. But to be able to reach the higher section, Mario needs a fire bounce from the
I'm betting Twitch died.
Pause.
Yep. For now, we'll skip explaining why Mario clips inside the pendulum.
Alright, what did you pause at?
I am at 4:15:11.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm at.
Yo!
That's it!
So we'll pause here for a second. Make sure everyone's doing good.
Brett Stairs is this is a bad week to stream for Twitch.
Apparently. God damn. Yeah, we actually in sync. That's kind of rad.
Hey, we're always in sync.
Love you, Faye. I love you, Faye. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, Twitch is just like having a week.
Yeah, Twitch is kind of getting fucky.
Yeah, and a little fucky wookie.
A little bit of a fucky.
Just a little bit.
A little bit of a fucky wucky.
Just a little bit of a fucky wucky. Just looking at that, there's still an hour. There's still an hour of this video.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There is still an hour of things left in this, and we're in like 2022.
I noticed this.
That's horrifying. That there is still an hour of this video left, and it's almost up to current year. Like, oh no. Brain wants to say things, help. How far we've come from simply cloning Goombas. Jesus Christ, we've come a long way. Also, I think it's okay to continue if you are ready, Faye.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Alright. 3, 2, 1, play.
And how the clone got there. We'll get back to that later. After more precise midair walking and waiting, the conditions are finally perfect.
I'm just seeing a fucking pendulum.
Mario turns into the ever so
pendulum has
slightly
become a
enters the back
fucking
of the
propeller,
hitbox, clipping him back out. Then he ground pounds. As the pendulum rotates, it enters a position where, because of imperfect geometry, an exposed ceiling squishes Mario, cancelling the ground pound and resetting his vertical speed back to 0. On the same frame, he's pushed out of the exposed ceiling. On the next frame, he enters freefall. From there, he can move into the next spot that will have an exposed ceiling and
we've literally ascended to the next plane of mathematics.
This is why the pendulum manipulation was so crucial. The pendulum needs to create 7 squish cancel spots at regular intervals of about 7 to 10 frames with no exposed ceilings in between. Mario can only move by a tiny amount between each ground pound, so all 7 squish cancel spots need to be very close to each other. At the start, the pendulum needs to stay below Mario, otherwise he'd bonk into it. And finally, because the pendulum is only tangible if Mario is close enough to it, as Mario goes higher, the angle range the pendulum can take gets smaller and smaller. When Mario is at the very top, he's too far from the pendulum to do any more squish cancels, but he's still too low to grab the ledge. Thankfully, DS273 had one last trick up his sleeve, a glitchy ledge grab. This wall is made up of 2 sections that seamlessly combine to create one surface. But as it turns out, due to some floating point rounding nonsense, each section has an ever so slightly different normal vector. As a result, there's a float precise position where Mario's 30 unit check finds the lower wall, but the 150 unit check does not find the higher wall, and he grabs a ledge from way below. This glitchy ledge grab was found on November 14, 2020, and it was the last piece of the puzzle DS273 needed to devise his master plan. Once on this spot, Mario could use a bob-omb to cross the gap, a Stardance clip to get up the elevator, and a fire clone to dismount the pole. But hold on, how do you get all this stuff here in the first place? We need to rewind a bit. The last one is the simplest. This fire clone is placed at the beginning of the stage using a preset hope from Tall Tall Mountain and behind camera anywhere. But despite being the simplest, it's not that simple, because Mario needs one of these bob-ombs for cloning, yet the object he's cloning is all the way up here. He needs to find a way to carry an object for an extended time without updating the hope at any step of the process. First, Mario makes both bob-ombs explode 1 frame apart. Just as he grabs it, the other bob-omb is unloaded. This causes the bob-omb's spawner to load into Mario's hands. Like we've seen before, a spawner is an invisible object. Because it's invisible, it doesn't need to be rendered, which in turn doesn't update the hope. Mario then carries that invisible object up until it also unloads and can be replaced. At the exact moment when it's replaced with a newly loaded fire object, Mario is now behind the camera, so again the hope is not updated.
That and lots of hours, Squid.
The hope where it sits waiting to burn Mario off the pole later on. The clones on the elevator are more interesting, but we'll get to those later. I did promise that I would explain how these fire clones got here. There are 3 of them. One has to be used as a sacrifice to prevent Mario from activating the useful fire clones too early. The clones were placed
people's
by
determination to not jump
using BC-8 to
when
drop
told.
the hope laterally, but at Mario's height.
I bet you can't get all these stars without jumping.
Restricted, which made the whole strategy harder to pull off. And now we take a look at how
and
the
they took that personally.
appears in this spot. It uses a known trick, the out-of-bounds failsafe mechanism, but in a new way. In the past, the Bob-omb was placed using a preset hope from another level that happened to be out of bounds in Tick-Tock Clock. But here, the preset hope is already in use, and there can only be one. There needs to be a way to place a Bob-omb out of bounds from within the level. Of course, Mario normally can't go out of bounds. On the rare occasion that he does find himself out of bounds, he dies immediately. Needless to say, this proved to be quite a challenge for DS273 to solve. The solution he came up with is nothing short of amazing.
Because obviously, because nothing else so far has been amazing.
Just below this treadmill, 31 units below to be exact, there's a wall overlap. When Mario dives with the Bob-omb onto the edge, the moving treadmill moves Mario off, which does two things. First, Mario enters a hands-free holding state, and second, his vertical speed of -24 is conserved. After one frame of falling, Mario's speed is now -28. On the second frame's first quarter step, Mario moves down by a quarter of that speed, or 7 units. He precisely enters the wall overlap and gets moved outside of the level. But wait, that's out of bounds. How can Mario be out of bounds without instantly dying? Well, he actually isn't. Even outside of the walls of the level, Mario isn't immediately out of bounds. As it turns out, the floor at the very bottom of the clock extends a little bit outside the walls. Mario's only treated as out of bounds if there's no floor under him, so technically he is still in bounds.
Oh my god, they did
Mario
not.
dives, which he can do while hands-free holding. He hits the actual out of bounds and bonks, which releases the Bob-omb and knocks him back into the level. Meanwhile, the hope, which while Mario is diving is in front of his position, ends up out of bounds. Now, a Bob-omb needs to be released there with some remote release method, either pause buffered hit stun, behind camera anywhere, or instant release. This turns out to be more challenging than it seems because of the 4,000 unit activation radius. For the failsafe to trigger, Mario needs to enter the Bob-omb's activation radius, which is this sphere. But the hope is too low for that radius to intersect this ledge, so the Bob-omb needs to be released at the hope laterally at about this height instead. However, at the moment when the Bob-omb is released, Mario needs to be outside of this zone. Otherwise, the failsafe would be triggered immediately and the Bob-omb would snap to Mario's position. This creates a bit of a problem considering the Bob-ombs are right here. But what if they weren't? Prior to setting this hope, Mario clones one of the Bob-ombs by reloading it from above the spinners. He uses that bomb to clip through the wall on the moving bar. Again, despite being outside the walls, the moving bar provides a floor for Mario to stand on. He releases the Bob-omb here, setting the hope in this weird semi-out-of-bounds spot. Then he clones another Bob-omb, making sure to avoid updating the hope. Using BCA, he throws it out of bounds. Something weird happens. The Bob-omb goes to the hope, but gets stuck in a weird mid-air oscillation. This sparks a few questions. Why does it do that? Because it's out of bounds. When a Bob-omb tries to move out of bounds, its movement is reversed, which normally should send it back towards the map. But when that new position is also out of bounds, it runs into the same issue on the next frame. The net result is the Bob-omb oscillates between two out of bounds positions, reversing its movement on every frame. But why is it out of bounds if it's just above the moving bar? Because just like any other object with collision, moving bars are only tangible if Mario is close to them. Because he's not, there's no floor here and the Bob-omb is indeed out of bounds. But if it's out of bounds, why doesn't it snap to Mario? Because the failsafe only triggers when Mario drops a Bob-omb. When he throws a Bob-omb, it goes to the hope regardless of if it's inbounds or not. So, Mario throws the Bob-omb out of bounds where it remains until he goes right next to the moving bar to make it tangible. During that time, he sets up the out-of-bounds hope using the treadmill for the next spot.
So you have to put the bomb in a limbo.
When he goes back to the moving bar, the Bob-omb falls on it and clips back in bounds. Just as it's about to explode, Mario dives and performs instant release on the bloated Bob-omb. This sends it to the hope laterally, but at Mario's height, far enough away that it deactivates until Mario enters its radius. But also, the radius happens to intersect this ledge. We finally got the Bob-omb where it needs to be. This, however, creates a new problem. Remember, Mario cannot enter the Bob-omb's activation radius until the exact moment when he's ready to use it. The radius intersects the destination, sure, but it also passes right through the section where Mario rides the pendulum into the ceiling.
Beyond.
To avoid reactivating the Bob-omb early, Mario actually needs to clip inside the pendulum as he's going up. Thankfully, there happens to be a tiny 1 unit wide sliver of floor inside the pendulum for Mario to stand on. He gets squished by the pendulum and finds himself on that 1 unit slice of ground. He gets burned while narrowly avoiding the walls and the Bob-omb's activation radius, and he reaches the top of the pendulum with 1 sector of health remaining. At last, after the whole squish cancel ground pound chain sequence, Mario can enter the radius and snap the Bob-omb next to him. One more detail. Because the Bob-omb is loaded at its maximum size, when it snaps to Mario's position, it pushes Mario out through the wall and inside the cage. But also, because the Bob-omb is so big, it touches the cage's wall hitboxes, both the outside wall and the inside wall. The outside wall doesn't push it any further out, but the inside wall pushes it all the way inside the cage, so it clips in alongside Mario. Finally, Mario can grab it and use it to cross the gap towards the elevator. And that's when we finally get to these 2 clones. How did they get here? Remember, they can't use their own preset hope because there can only be 1. The solution is very simple. You take all of the steps needed to reach the spot, the entire thing, and you do it twice. The first time, after crossing the gap with the Bob-omb, you use that Bob-omb to place the hope here. Then you go back down and use BCA to release a coin and a fire clone. Finally, you do all of this again and get back up, this time with all the right tools to climb the rest of the way. After all of this work, Mario gets past the pole in 0.
Rewatch this but have a symbol counter.
If only it were that simple. Remember, the pole isn't the end here. Several challenges remain. First of all, because there are 3 instances of spawning displacement to re-enter the clock, the level can only be entered with a preset hope a total of 3 times. Get a Hand needs a preset hope, which leaves only 2 uses of a preset hope for 3 stars that need it. The second problem is that the Pedro Spot VSC strategy for the end of Stomp on the Thwomp required a different preset hope to send a Bob-omb high above Mario. The third problem is that time jumps on moving bars also required its own preset hope for the Bob-omb clip at the end. How could all of these extra Bob-ombs and preset hopes ever be reconciled? Well, the third one was actually solved in September of 2018 by DS273. It turns out the overuse of preset hopes with limited opportunities to enter Tick-Tock Clock from anywhere in the castle was spotted as a potential issue back then as well. In an effort to cut preset hopes out, DS273 figured out time jumps on moving bars without the Bob-omb at the end. The solution he came up with was the first use of squish cancel in the ABC. It made use of both pendulums for the ending instead of just one. The far one was used to get some height and dive to this moving bar, and the second was used to squish cancel a dive recover to allow Mario to enter freefall. From a dive recover, Mario can't grab onto ledges, but from freefall, he can. This lets him grab this ledge and reach the star in no A presses with no Bob-omb, and therefore no preset hope. Now for the other 2 problems. Luckily, both of them can be solved the same way. Unluckily, that way adds to the solution to get past the pole 1 extra thick layer of madness. Remember, the bloated Bob-omb used to cross the gap is one of the 2 Bob-ombs found at the very bottom of the stage. The solution to the 2 problems is to bring the other Bob-omb past the pole. The general idea of the route stays roughly the same until it's time to make the final ascent. That's when even more steps are needed to bring not just 1, but 2 Bob-ombs up. First, there are a few explosion clones that need to be set up for what's coming up. Explosion clones function like you would expect. When Mario collides with them, they knock him back and damage him, then they become intangible, just like most other clones. Mario places 1 explosion clone over there using BCA and 3 more right here. The first clone is a sacrifice so that the other 2 can be used later. With that done, the hope is set up out of bounds on the moving bar, and the first Bob-omb is thrown there using BCA, where it will be held in place safely, much to our convenience. Next, the hope is moved out of bounds using the clip below the treadmill. This hope will be used to move both Bob-ombs up the clock. Now, Mario wants to grab the second Bob-omb. Here, however, there's no other Bob-omb whose spawner can be conveniently used to bypass updating the hope. This is where the explosion clones come into play. They allow the use of pause buffered hitstun until a new invisible object is able to be loaded into Mario's hands, a star particle spawner. This takes a while, which is why 2 active clones were needed. The first one to knock Mario back, and the second one to extend his invincibility frames long enough to load the star particle spawner. That spawner quickly unloads, so now Mario's holding a vacant slot. Therefore, he needs to be careful not to generate too much dust particles and other temporary objects that could load into his hands and update the hope. Nonetheless, he climbs up the spinners and reaches these cubes. He loads the Bob-omb and drops it at the hope with BCA just outside of the activation radius. This, however, is an awkward position. It's too low to be useful for the rest of the climb and too high to be worked with and dropped higher up. So it needs to be lowered first. To do that, Mario goes down to this walkway and enters the activation radius, snapping the Bob-omb to him. Then he does a breakdance kick to get the Bob-omb to explode and does instant release on it while it's bloated at its maximum size. This sends the Bob-omb back to the hope, but this time a bit lower and a bit bigger. The next step is to climb up to the moving hand, but without reactivating the Bob-omb. To do that, Mario can simply ride the wild pendulum up to the hand. This climb just barely works. Mario is less than 1 unit from clipping through the pendulum because it's rising too fast. From there, the other explosion comes in handy to set up another pause buffer at hitstun. Mario enters the Bob-omb's activation radius, grabs the bloated bomb and gets pushed off the hand where he drops it back to the hope, still bloated but much higher this time. Then it's back to the first Bob-omb. Again, it's dropped to the hope, bloated as well, using instant release. The two Bob-ombs end up very close together, the first one slightly lower and the second one slightly higher. After the squish cancel ground pound chain, it's time to reactivate one Bob-omb. The two radii are very close together, and as it turns out, because it's higher, the second Bob-omb's radius is the one that Mario enters first. Therefore, that's the one that gets reactivated, and the other one is kept in place for now.
On that red
this proves to
screen,
be
you can see
quite
that
the
Bob-omb
problem, though, because the
wigging
range
out.
of motion
It's
is extremely limited.
I just not having fun there in that situation.
Not completely inside the cage because that would load the other Bob-omb. Instead, it pushes him between the two walls where their combined push cancels out. While in there, Mario has 2 frames where he's able to move out of the way until he exits the outside wall hitbox and he completes the clip into the cage. At this point, he's within 1 single unit of activating the other Bob-omb. Finally, he's able to grab the bloated Bob-omb and do the rest
amount
of the
of precision in
After
this
getting
is
past the
so
pole, he can
huge.
retrieve the first
Like
Bob-omb by
it
entering its
is
activation
literally
radius.
one of the
We're
most
almost
like
done. From
precise
here, the bomb has 2
things
separate purposes. In the pit and the pendulums, it's used to replace the
I have
hope
seen
at
in,
the top of
like,
the pole
a
before
while.
collecting the star, so that after re-entering the clock, another star that gets past the pole can be done right away. The last detail to consider for that star is that because it's now down to 0 A-presses, Mario can't kick the wall to recoil into the star and set up spawning displacement. So a punch is used instead. The principle is the same, but the execution proved to be a lot more difficult and precise. In order to receive the recoil speed and touch the star on the same frame, a very specific sequence of events needs to happen. First, Mario punches from on top of the pendulum shaft. Then he snaps down to the head. This is possible because when Mario is on the ground, he can move from a higher floor to a lower floor by up to 100 units at once. On the next frame, Mario is on a float-precise seam between 2 walls, so he gets pushed by both. This sends him next to the star, and his punch connects with the wall. Finally, he receives recoil and touches the star 1 frame
But because
later,
of the reactor's icon, it is exactly like I'm yawning.
This specific set of conditions turned out to be nearly impossible. After making and running a brute forcer to figure out a configuration that worked, Panenkoek found nothing. His closest attempt was just 2 units short of touching the star. But after brainstorming new options with DS273, he finally found one single solution that required a dive roll from the other pendulum to punch the wall with enough speed. Note that the hand also needs to be in this precise spot to stop Mario from doing a star dance clip on this platform instead, which would ruin the spawning displacement. For Stomp on the Thwomp, the Bob-omb is used, along with a slightly more complex pendulum manipulation, to send Mario to the pedal spot. This was the combined work of DS273 and Panenkoek. First, Mario goes up to the platform above the pendulums where he manipulates both of them at once. Then he falls on top of the first pendulum, reactivating the Bob-omb. It pushes Mario into a spot just a little bit inside the ceiling, like we've seen before. Mario walks in midair stuck in the ceiling, and he's moved around by the Bob-omb pushing him back. Once he gets into the pedal spot, the rest of the strategy is very much like the last Stomp on the Thwomp improvement. He gathers nearly 700 speed, then uses a double VSC to reach all the way to the Thwomp and collect a star in a single A-press. And this is how Tick-Tock Clock went from 7 A-presses down to only 4, 3 of which are to enter the stage. But this wouldn't hold for very long. A new face in the community was concocting unusual plans. He had been around for a few years, even contributing to the latest A-Press saves, but nothing on the scale of what he was about to achieve. The complexity level was about to get from the stratosphere to outer space thanks to...
We're not already
in space.
Okay, evidently we're not! What the f... The final A-Press saves.
On August 21st, Pan&Koic and Marbler completed their project of the past couple of months. Together, they saved the final A-Press of Lethal Lava Land. They got Elevator Tour in the Volcano in 0 A-Presses, bringing the total count to 15. First
oh my god.
Why is this star problematic? Well, because of the final boss of the A-Button challenge,
yeah.
the pole. There's no way to get off this pole without falling down or jumping.
10.
While it is possible to reach another star,
I mean, do you see what they're doing?
The two platforms are too far apart, and a long jump is required to cross that gap.
I'm supposed
Instead,
to
Mario
stay
will gain
here.
height another way, using a familiar method in a completely new context.
What the fuck?
Let's reminisce the mechanics of spawning displacement. The reason it works is because Mario's displacement by a moving platform is based on its state at the end of the previous frame, effectively causing platforms to move Mario for 1 extra frame after they should. If that displacement is rotational...
This is like beyond my realm of understanding.
This is probably the worst video to react to because neither of us understand entirely what's going on, but it's fun to watch.
It is so fascinating.
Exactly the same, except that instead of a map transition,
they have broken this game so far beyond what I ever thought was imaginable for breaking a fucking game.
The rotation is very small, but the radius is so large that Mario's move upward substantially. Enough, in fact, to end up.
Is this even a game at this point?
In a parallel universe.
Is there a game in here somewhere?
I didn't think it was possible to shatter a game this bad.
Move into a PU. Now the question becomes, how can Mario be on a rotating platform in one frame and then
woke up today.
This is where
felt kind of awesome. I guess I'm just gonna become God in this game now.
Let's break down the 26-hour task step by step. Mario begins by pushing a bully into the lava.
Allow me to just initiate warp
this
speed.
interrupts the death animation of the bully, which leaves it stuck below the floor. Since there's no more floor under this, the bully is out of bounds. Just like the Bob-omb in Tick-Tock Clock, it gets stuck alternating between 2 positions. As a side note, for visual clarity, the bully will often be represented in a superposition. Just keep in mind this isn't actually the case, the bully is merely alternating between the two. This state is particularly interesting because it keeps the bully's speed frozen. Even though the bully itself is out of bounds, its hitbox sticks out of the lava just enough that Mario can still collide with it. If Mario runs into the bully perpendicularly to its movement, he transfers some of his momentum to the bully, adding a tiny bit to its speed. This is called slow bully battery. After doing this a few times, and by a few I mean 31,000 over 21 hours, the bully now has 4,000 speed. We can do something with that.
Just a few.
First, we need to wait a few minutes. In Super Mario 64, 1 full turn is 2 to the 16, or 65,536 angled units.
I am so upset at the
out of bounds and its movement is reversed, the game adds exactly half of that.
It's like reminding me the pain of hearing a fucking title screen music.
67. Yep. As it turns out, the angle added is 1/200th of the degree shy of half a turn. This discrepancy is obviously completely meaningless, unless you're the ABC community. While the bully is alternating between 2 positions, the angle at which it moves slowly drifts over time. So slowly, in fact, that it takes over 36 minutes to do a full rotation. Coincidentally, it's also exactly the time it takes for the displacement angle to exceed the 32-bit integer limit and overflow, causing a game crash. But there's an additional quirk that makes this even more interesting. When calculating the displacement, the game truncates the angle to the nearest multiple of 16 using what's called hexadecimal angle units. Therefore, in practice, as the angle drifts, the actual displacement only changes once every 16 frames. Because 16 frames is an even number, the angle change always happens while the bully is in one of its 2 possible positions. As a result, this position acts as a pivot around which the other position rotates extremely slowly. Choosing one position to act as the pivot is fairly simple. After colliding with Mario, if the bully's angle is even, its current position will be the pivot. If it's odd, the pivot will be the opposite. This means that while Pan&Koic was building up the bully's speed, every single one of the 31,000 collisions had to result in an even angle. Using these pivots and a lot of patience, you can get the bully to move into any convenient location you want.
This
Marver
is
uses
so
this to get the bully
beyond
into a nice spot
absurd.
for the next part, but first he needs Mario to be in a bit of a better shape. To climb the volcano up to the spinning heart, he gets some coins for a lava boost, then gets this bully stuck in the corner and uses a dive roll knockback to clear this ledge. This method will be used a few
I
times
feel like
to
I
refill
can't quite
Mario's
call them
health throughout
bullies
the run.
anymore at this point.
When the bully has
They are
rotated
being
around the
bullied.
pivot enough, Mario runs into it, so this position becomes the new pivot. This causes the other position to start moving. The process is repeated a couple of times to move the bully around, which takes about an hour. Now, Mario activates the elevator and rides it until it falls into the lava. And on this frame, the first of many magic tricks, the bully appears. Because the elevator is slightly under the lava, this creates a floor for the bully to move onto. So instead of turning around, the bully does move to the elevator. On the next frame, it moves onto the rock on the other side of the stage. Now the bully is back in bounds, but it's going so fast that its next position is out of bounds. Again, this reverses its direction and freezes its speed. On the next frame, the same thing happens, and the bully reverses back to its previous position. The result is therefore exactly the same as before, even though the bully is now in bounds. Regardless of the bully's current position, so long as its next position would be out of bounds, it will behave this way. 10 minutes of pivoting later, the bully is now in a perfect position.
This is everything I was hoping it would be.
You know, slow bully battery seems to imply the existence of a fast bully battery. What does that look like? Well, don't blink. The bully now has over 6,000 speed. What happened?
What?
This time, Mario isn't bullying the bully is bullying Mario. The collision angles are reversed. The bully is mostly perpendicular and Mario is parallel to the collision tangent. In this scenario, the bully actually transfers 3 times its momentum to Mario. This isn't a bug, it's an intentional feature to give bullies a bit more punch to their attack. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue.
We fucking turned Mario enemies into subatomic particles for the sake of not jumping.
This is the original textbook use case for Squish Cancel. The edge of the elevator has an exposed ceiling because of a rounding error, and it's a dynamic
Because of a rounding error, a specific quark bully appears.
On the next
fucking
frame,
guy!
first the elevator replaces Mario to the exposed slanted ceiling, squishing him. Then the bully
At what point do we turn Mario into a fucking black hole?
Momentum, or just shy of
Jesus
10,000
Christ.
speed. Before the
I
game
want to say that happened. That's happened already.
The Squish Bush, now disjointed because of the
Have
bully collision,
already
moves
made
Mario
life like
teleporting
Android
universes.
replacements.
Might as well.
The ceiling and the elevator, the Squish Cancel is complete. Mario still has his high speed, but he's no longer being knocked back. He's now idle. Therefore, the speed is preserved. On the next frame, the elevator moves back under Mario.
Gonna be asking the makers of like
still on the ground.
Of like the fucking Mars habitats, or like the rocket that can finally break warp speeds. Like, how did you? So how did you come up with the idea for like for this warp speed engine? You called it this,
when Mario tries to
and the fucking thing it takes over is like
conserved if he's on the ground.
Well,
if he's in the air,
due to a rounding error in Super Mario 64.
Does lose a significant
so we figured out warp drives by you ever heard of a game called Mario 64?
Over Mario and back and back out of bounds until Mario hits it again. That transfers Mario's move speed back to the bully. The important element of this interaction is the momentum being tripled.
We were challenged to not jump.
This breaks the usual conservation of energy. Just before the collision, the bully
so he created the most efficient method of jumping.
Was lost during the 2 frames the bully spent moving in bounds earlier.
To explain to you how we created the warp drive engines, first we need to start. What is an A-press?
What is an A-press?
The elevator needs to send Mario into a
For you all to understand the mechanics behind this, here's Mario 64.
Understand the concept behind the triangle mapping theorem. You can understand that the space-time continuum is similar enough to Super Mario 64. Coding structure. So if we move against a wall in a ceiling,
at 6,000 speed.
while a floor is under us for long enough, we can build up speed in a theory called the hyperspeed clipping buildup.
The pivot is far out of bounds and the bully slowly rotates back into Mario.
We have an engine piston that does this over and over again, constantly building up speed while the universe rolls behind it. If you build up speed for 24 hours, you can build up enough speed units through these hyperspeed grinding effects to teleport yourself to Mars. It is very simple. It's a very simple problem with a simple solution.
Angle for the next
and thus we have solved space travel for everyone.
However, gravity plays an interesting part. Therefore, thanks to the bully superposition theorem, we can hyperpivot ourselves around the gravitational well using our hyperspeed.
What the fuck is going on in this video?
Triangles.
Throughout the
What the
entire
fuck is going on here?
Yeah, you fucking are like joking about it. Look at the video.
What used to be an imperceptible rotation is now
They're
pretty
actually
obvious.
doing
This
it.
actually becomes a problem at even higher speeds.
They've actually made a fucking warp drive in Mario. What the fuck?
And you can't simply wait out a full rotation when that would crash the game. The last 3 fast bully batteries all need to be done without moving the bully. Also, the second to last one has to be done within 5 frames or Mario would get squished by another exposed ceiling, which was another nightmare for Marbler to solve. In this 3-hour ordeal, the bully comes dangerously close to a PU more times than we can count and ultimately runs into Mario at 847,000 speed. This gives Mario 3.4 million speed. And now Mario is ready to take an elevator ride out of
Oh yeah, we can absolutely send you this video,
This is actually a bit more complex. For the elevator to keep affecting Mario for a frame, Mario needs to actually be on it. Not only does Mario need to go to a PU in a single frame, he needs to trick the elevator into thinking he hasn't moved at all. How does he do that? Simple, by moving to a point in a PU that corresponds to the elevator in the main map. Except
how would we get around this? Well, simple. As long as you move fast enough, you can move to a parallel universe whose position is the same as ours.
Apple! Hi, Apple!
But in a PU, on the next frame, the
hi,
elevator still thinks Mario is standing on it and rotates ever so slightly.
Warp drives.
This rotational displacement, when magnified over a distance of 52 parallel universes, sends Mario almost 4,000 units up, well above the star platform.
I say hi,
the
hi, like
conditions
Apple.
for this are quite precise, considering Mario needs to stay in bounds. The maximum vertical
we're warping
displacement
around.
achievable when the elevator is in this state is quite small, which is why Panin and Marbler had to settle for an insane distance to magnify it over. This causes the horizontal
This is some of the most like
problematic.
intense
There was
shit
no way to
I think
have
I
the
have
elevator
ever
move
seen.
Mario up far enough without also flinging him far out of bounds. They solved this problem by making the elevator move Mario an entire PU over. Now, Mario is a bit too high, about 500 units above the star platform. To correct that, after a bit of speed adjustment, Pan and Quick had to make Mario fall down quite a bit. That fall takes 20 frames and moves Mario by 975 parallel universes. And now,
just,
all that's left is to navigate back in bounds.
Plus parallel universes.
624 PUs in the x-axis and 96 on the z-axis, and finally 352 PUs x and 44 PUs z back to the main map. Collecting the star is trivial. Reaching the star was not.
You can't keep calling this trivial.
Let's back up a bit on the
timeline. Really can't.
April 19th,
We're going through multiple universes right now.
The press save was being heavily worked on, and it was looking more and more likely by the day. On that night, DS273 and Marbler were in a voice chat.
I hope you're having a good day, by the way, Apple. Oh, it's good to see you.
Press came up. What about saving that last A press? Marbler and DS273 were laughing at even suggesting such a thing. First of all, that jump is probably the single A press that gets the most work done. It skips going up these boxes, these treadmills, and of course the thwomp itself. They had no Stardance clip left, no preset hope, no pendulums, and one bob-omb from all the way at the bottom of the clock. Needless to say, it was never going to happen, and they had a good laugh about it. The next day, Marbler set out to demonstrate how infeasible this idea was by going through each step and showing precisely why it couldn't be done. He came to the conclusion that in total there were 8 problematic points. 2 here, 2 here, 3 here, and finally getting on top of the thwomp. Most of these could theoretically be solved with a Stardance clip, but proving that is useless. You can't just spawn 700 coin stars. But then, Marbler looked closer at each failure point, and the closer he looked, the more answers he found. First, the pole platform, which uses the only available Stardance clip. This in itself is a problem, because it means the method to get past the pole with its use of a star and a fire clone is a one-time use. For a zero-A press strategy to have any kind of a chance of being possible, there would need to be a way to climb up and down the pole to set up hopes for cloning. It was time for Mario to do away with non-renewable height sources.
Yes, we need to do renewable height sources.
With the amount of obstacles on the way up the clock, the problem becomes very similar to what Bowser in the Sky used to be, a very long deconstructed Goomba bridge.
Please, it can't get much more insane than this, please.
And this time, instead of casually walking around Bowser in the sky, every single step involved repeating the madness-inducing nonsense to get past the pole in no A presses. Every single time. The elevator platform could theoretically be reached from below using a dive recover, a fire bounce, and a misalignment. Unfortunately, despite this wall having an open corner, it's not pointing away from the origin, therefore no misalignment exists. But if instead a bloated Bob-omb could snap to Mario's position and push him into that corner, it could possibly push him completely through the wall hitboxes and into the floor beyond. This diagonal is 141 units. A maximum-sized bloated Bob-omb pushes Mario by 149 units. On paper, this could actually work. In practice, well, that's another story. Where would that Bob-omb that magically snaps to Mario's position even come from? The 4,000 unit sphere would need to intersect this minuscule spot in a way that Mario can enter.
Well, you know, once we start using dark matter and cosmic rays.
But also, what Bob-omb?
I feel like we're not far away from that.
The only two Bob-ombs are already in use. Well, it turns out both of these questions can be answered at once using pause buffered hit stun. When Mario grabs a Bob-omb, it's always placed 100 units in front of Mario, regardless of where the hope is. This allows Mario to do a Bob-omb glide despite the hope still being disjointed. This comes within one frame of failing, but it does get Mario across without updating the hope. Then the Bob-omb is released back to the hope, which, remember, is out of bounds across the clock. By some absolute miracle, with a very slight modification to its exact position, the same hope used to cross this gap and to retrieve the Bob-omb past the pole can also perfectly intersect this open corner. This lets Mario reuse the same Bob-omb to be pushed completely past the wall hitboxes and into the floor hitbox, bypassing the use of Star Dance Clip. This groundbreaking discovery had two huge implications. First, the Star Dance Clip was freed up to be used somewhere else, higher up in the clock. But crucially, there was now nothing preventing Mario from making multiple trips up and down the pole. Well, almost nothing. There were just 5 little hurdles to get over.
Just 5 more.
First, Mario also needs a repeatable way of getting off the pole. Thankfully, after the first trip up, he can lure this heave-ho to get stuck in just the right spot to have it fling Mario from the pole directly onto the elevator above. How convenient. Now for the second problem. The setup to clip this corner was extremely precise and required a fire clone, but remember, fire clones can only be interacted with once. Each trip up the pole adds one more fire clone, and they all need to be in different positions for Mario to be able to touch them individually. Contrarily to Goombas, which can be as close to each other as possible, fire clones need to be at least 37 units away from each other
creation to avoid
the elevator
reality,
can only take up a limited set of positions, so the possible heights Mario could achieve were also limited in the same way. All things considered, a maximum of 21 trips up the pole were theoretically possible with this method. The third issue was between the hope and the squish cancel ground pound chain. Remember, the old position was just barely far enough away to allow for the strategy to be possible in the first place. Sadly, this new required hope was incompatible. It prompted SJMHRP to revisit the squish cancel ground pound chain and find a completely new method. And the one she found was not only compatible with the new hope, it was also a lot simpler to set up and repeat. The fourth headache was between the hope and the instant release at the moving bar. The new hope was also incompatible with this part since it barely overlapped with the entire moving bar. This one was fixed with the clever use of BCA right at the edge of the activation radius. Finally, the thing with fire clones is that while they can give Mario additional height, they do so at the cost of his health. As of now, getting all the way up to the pole cost Mario 11 health sectors, way above the maximum survivable damage of 7. While theoretically, coin clones could be used along the way to refill some of that missing health, they would need at least 4 per trip, which would be unbelievably annoying to set up. But SJMHRP's improvement to the squish cancel ground pound chain also took down the damage Mario takes from 6 to 2, meaning that Mario could live through this climb without a single coin for extra health. Now, the Bob-omb used past the pole in Stomp on a Thwomp's 1A press strategy could be repurposed for other things higher up in the clock. However, at its current height, the 4,000 unit radius ends up short, so the Bob-omb needs to be moved up while staying out of bounds. But here's a problem. Mario needs to enter the activation radius to snap the Bob-omb to him, then he needs to be out of the 4,000 unit cylinder to release the Bob-omb back to the Hope at this new height. How can he go all the way from here to there? Certainly not with behind camera anywhere, but maybe with pause buffered hitstun. But even PBH ends up way too short. Enter the Hitstun Highway. This series of explosion clones creates a path for Mario to extend his hitstun timer all the way across the clock and exit the activation radius before releasing the Bob-omb without ever updating the Hope. Another problem solved. And now a new problem is created. To get from the elevator to time jumps on moving bars, usually a heave-ho flip bypassed the whole thing. But if it has to be stuck here, Mario needs a new way to get from here to there. Thankfully, a simple misalignment on the corner of this platform gets the job done. Except it doesn't, because that would reactivate the Bob-omb we've just moved. Instead, another fire clone has to be used. For multiple trips, a string of fire clones. The next failure point was these cubes, which were decidedly too far apart to ascend. However, there is an alternative to navigating those, reaching the top of this cage and diving across. Unfortunately, that's not easy either, but it is possible with fire bounces. Oh, and a second chain of squish cancel ground pounds on this pendulum that comes within a single unit of reactivating the Bob-omb early.
Of course it is.
No big deal. The final ground pound is actually pretty
not
significant.
even close.
Yeah,
not
Mario
a
is in the
single
ascending
unit.
part of the ground pound, quarter step collisions are not calculated, which is how he can
not a big deal.
sometimes.
Not a big deal.
Regardless, another collision check is also made at the start of the frame. But there's a key difference in the hitbox shape used for those checks. Instead of using the air movement hitboxes, it uses the ground movement hitbox, which is narrower at the top. Because it's narrower, it happens to miss Mario on this frame. On the next frame, because the moving bar is springing out fast enough, the hitbox skips over Mario entirely.
My brain.
As Mario starts to fall back down, he meets the side of the moving bar, which pushes him out. But because that would push him into a ceiling, the movement is cancelled and Mario stays put. After collisions with walls are handled, collisions with floors are next on the list, so Mario lands on top of the moving bar. To get up on this walkway though, there was no misalignment. It wasn't anywhere near the Bob-omb activation radius. There was nothing to work with. This is where the Star Dance clip would have to be used, which means everything further up can only be accessed once, so better make it count. And make it count, Marbler did. The first treadmill step can be approached in two different ways.
Of course.
The first is somehow getting 324 units of height to reach a misalignment, which can only be done with a Star Dance clip. The second is to reach it from the walkway instead, which is just a little bit too far away to be possible. But what about this Bob-omb that we placed out of bounds at around the height of the pole?
What about the Bob-omb?
You guessed it, its activation radius just so happens to now be perfectly placed to snap the
This
Bob-omb
whole thing
back to
started
Mario
with them
right
going,
here, which pushes him
"Look
into
how
the 1 unit
impossible this
misalignment and
is."
snaps him up to the treadmill. Then Mario does a quick turn. When the stick is held in a direction different than the one Mario is looking in, he slowly turns until he matches that new angle. But if instead Mario is walking and comes to a complete stop, he can then turn in any direction instantly. So this is what happens. Mario lands with the stick at a neutral position, which stops his momentum. Then he walks at the minimum stick range for 1 frame, comes to a stop, and instantly turns around. This allows him to turn around in only 4 frames instead of up to 16, which in turn lets him grab the Bob-omb before it falls out of his grasp. Now for the final treadmill, which again is simply too high. To have any chance of getting up, Marbler had to think outside the box, where he found one sliver of hope: the spinners. The height difference from here to there is just barely within reason, but could this gap be cleared? Well, of course it can, with the Bob-omb glide. The problem though is that the Bob-omb is so bloated that Mario ends up completely overshooting it. The spinner is also still a bit too high to reach without the extra help from stored vertical speed. So instead, Marbler waits out the fuse timer, then re-grabs the Bob-omb as it's about to explode when it's slightly less bloated. This turned out to be a bit of a tricky maneuver. First, Mario gets pushed off the treadmill, so he dives back on. On the next frame, he does a dive recover, which has to be pause buffered because it's another B press on 2 consecutive frames. Because the end of the treadmill is so steep, after 1 quarter step, Mario immediately lands again, which stores a vertical speed of 26. On the next frame, he does a standing punch, which also has to be pause buffered because it's yet another B press. This establishes the Bob-omb as the target of a grab, but because it's a standing punch, Mario doesn't quite grab the Bob-omb yet. At the same time, he gets pushed back off the treadmill by the now expanding Bob-omb, which reactivates his conserved 26 vertical speed. On the next frame, Mario does a pause buffered dive, the 4th B press on consecutive frames. This makes him grab the Bob-omb instantly because it's already the target of a grab, and also makes him land on the treadmill again, this time with 22 vertical speed. At this point, the Bob-omb pushes Mario back off the treadmill where he enters freefall while hands-free holding. His stored vertical speed carries him up and a ground pound covers the rest, but it's just not quite enough to land square on the spinner. That's a handful of units too far to reach because the side wall of the spinner prevents landing on the corner. At least it would, except there's a sliver of floor 1 unit wide sticking out of the wall hitbox, which allows Mario to land safely on the spinner. Staying on the spinner is also a bit tricky, but it is doable thanks to the Bob-omb still pushing Mario back and keeping him on the steep slope long enough. After this section, the rest is a piece of cake until the thwomp.
This is not looking like a piece
Here
of
the
cake.
Bob-omb is used to get a fire clone by the thwomp using BCA.
I mean,
thankfully there's another
if we're
fire
talking about the
spinner
cake
right at
from
the top of the
Portal,
clock,
maybe.
so no need to go all the way down for it. Besides, remember, there's no turning back after using the Star Dance clip.
I have to be
But
worried
the real
about
problem
literally
here is
everything
that the
every
flame
time
clone
you say
needs to
something
be
about cake.
higher than the highest point where Mario can set the hope or release a clone.
What is that?
This was solved by DS273 and Marbler using
know
a wild
exactly
combination
why.
of object slot manipulation magic
Come
and the jagged diagonal of
on.
the treadmill's
You don't have
floor
to
get
worry
an
about
enhanced
saying
Yeah,
cake
coming on,
around
that's the
me.
problem.
still wasn't enough because while they could get Mario a bit higher up with a ground pound, he couldn't release an object and therefore place the hope until after he landed. That is until DS273 had the idea of using BCA not
There it
just
is.
to release the clone, but to set the hope
You got a
itself.
whole bakery.
By forcing Mario to go off camera during the ground pound, the hope
It's good.
stops updating at this point, so it remains up there. And finally, the last magic trick. A dive recover VSC into a ground pound squish cancel fire bounce to reach a misalignment in the corner
What the
of the
fuck did you just say?
This is not like
Yes.
a regular misalignment. Instead, it exists because
I
the
hate
wall
everything.
is ever so slightly slanted
Simple.
sideways, creating
Of
a
course.
1 unit gap in its corner at certain heights. Now,
Did not
repeatedly
think
burning
of
Mario
that.
to clear gaps takes its toll on a poor plumber.
Oh my
Thankfully, there
God.
are 2 spinning
I
hearts
hate
in
this.
Tick-Tock Clock, but despite all the best efforts to minimize the burning damage, Mario comes within 1/16th of a sector of health of dying. On top of that, 4 coin clones are used to refill some health. Setting all of this up requires multiple trips up and down the clock to place all of these clones. How many exactly? 5 trips to set up enough fire clones at this elevator for the rest of the route. 2 trips to set up the explosion clones for the Bob-omb glide under pause buffered hitstun. 2 trips to set up the explosion clones for the hitstun highway. 2 trips for the flame clones to get off this elevator. 2 trips for the flame clones
What
needed
is
to get
all
up
of
on the
this
stage
fuckery?
and coin clones to refill Mario's
Please.
health. 1 trip for the flame and coin clones
Explain
on top
to
of the
me.
cage. 1 trip to set up a coin and a fire clone for the Star Dance
Yeah,
trip.
it's simple.
1 more trip to set up a flame clone here because the way the Bob-omb is sent to the out-of-bounds hope for the last
Super
time prevents
simple.
Mario from manipulating the heave-ho into throwing him directly on the elevator. It's possible to get on the elevator with at least 128 units of height, excluding 128. A dive recover gives Mario precisely 128 units of height, so it's not enough, hence the use of 1 more fire clone. And finally, a 17th trip up the clock where Mario sets up 2 Bob-ombs out of bounds. He climbs up with the squish cancel ground pound chain. He snaps 1 Bob-omb to his position and crosses the gap under pause buffered hitstun to avoid updating the hope. He climbs up to the pole by snapping that same Bob-omb to him again and clipping into the floor of the pole platform. He snaps the other Bob-omb to him and uses a pause buffered hitstun highway to carry it across the map without updating the out-of-bounds hope. He gets flung next to the elevator and flame bounces onto it. He hits another fire clone to cross this gap. He rides this pendulum up, does a final squish cancel ground pound chain up to the cage, flame bounces up to the top. He Star Dance clips to this walkway, snaps the Bob-omb to him 1 last time to get on the treadmill, then glides into a misalignment
was
in the
that?
spinner. He carries that Bob-omb all the way to the top, where using hands-free holding and BCA, he sets up the hope
Ow.
for 1 last little bit
You
of cloning. Finally, he completes the star with VSC, a ground pound squish cancel, a fire bounce, and a misalignment to get on top of the thwomp. At last, Tick-Tock Clock is A-Press free. Tick-Tock Clock is conquered. At least on paper. Every piece of the puzzle has been figured out and proven possible, but an A-Press save is only truly proven when there's a proper task that pieces it all together in one fluid motion. This unbelievably complex task is, as always, given to Pan and Koic 2012.
Right, yeah, of course. Let's go with the Pan and Koic.
He isn't
just
doing
tell Pan and Koic to do it.
SJMHRP and Marbler join him as well. SJMHRP's specialty was the 17 squish cancel ground pound chains on the lower pendulum. Pan and Koic dealt with everything in the lower part of the clock, which came out to be most of the work. Marbler took care of the upper section, taking over after SJMHRP and handing back the task to Pan and Koic whenever Mario had to go back down to set up more clones. Very little of the tasking process could be automated. Aside from pendulum manipulation and a couple of repeated processes, nearly all of this 6-hour task was painstakingly created frame by frame, which took in a ballpark of 180 hours and over 160,000 re-records. The team ran into an issue with the preset Hope that threatened nearly the entire first half of the work, but they managed to miraculously salvage it. The theory crafting of the route was done in parallel to the work on the 3 A-Press saves from July. Work on the task began soon after Lethal Lava Land was finished in mid-September. It was finally completed on October 27th and published 2 weeks later on November 13th, 2022. As of today, there are 14 A-Presses left in Super Mario 64. So, what are those 14 A-Presses and how could we save them? First, let's look at the famous A-Presses to enter Tick-Tock Clock. With 3 spawning displacement strategies allowing for a re-entry without using A, Tick-Tock Clock now needs to be entered 3 times from the floor. The prospect of adding more spawning displacement is quite grim. It just does not seem possible. But even if it was, Tick-Tock Clock already requires 3 different preset hopes that can't be set within the stage itself. Each entry that requires an A-Press sets the hope somewhere else before entering the stage, so adding another spawning displacement would disrupt this fine balance. So what other options are there? Well, in this room of the castle, not that many. The level entrance is pretty high up, so there's no hope to ever get up directly from the floor to the clock and no A-Presses. That's not even close. The only possible avenue would be to reach it from the path to Bowser in the sky. Unfortunately, to have any chance of that, Mario would need at least about 90 speed. With nothing useful to work with, that's well beyond the maximum speed attainable. For now, these 3 A-Presses are looking pretty solid. Similarly, also in this room is a pair of twin A-Presses, one to go to Rainbow Ride and one to go to Wing Mario over the Rainbow. Again, the outlook is bleak. 90 speed would suffice, but it's still nowhere near feasible. The next A-Press left is in Jolly Roger Bay to collect the star Treasure of the Ocean Cave. This A-Press, as trivial as it is, has been a total nightmare to try and save for over a decade. The star is 24 units too high to be collected with a die recover. The chests look like the obvious solution, but they're simple objects with a hitbox and no actual geometry. Mario can't stand or bounce on them.
Cliff!
The star is at one of the highest points in the room, so it's tricky to approach it otherwise. It was found that given enough speed, Mario
Welcome to quantum physics.
Unfortunately, this method requires about 260 speed.
Hope you had a good day.
Warhammer 40k Dark Tide, were you enjoying Dark Tide?
It's only about 180 using these pillars. Multiple ideas to build up more speed were examined, but none of them were successful. The flying ship doesn't have the right surface for CF sliding, nor the right conditions for hyperspeed punching. This rock has a lot of potential, but the conditions aren't perfectly right to allow for hyperspeed of some kind. Research is still ongoing to try and find new ways to build up speed, or to try and lower the 260 requirement. No significant progress has been made in years. Princess's Secret Slide is in a similar boat, but much worse. While the star you get for finishing the slide under 21 seconds is low enough for that recover, the star inside the box isn't. The box itself can be broken with a die recover, but then the star is 31 units too high. There's very little hope because the geometry of the room is so barren that there simply isn't anything to work with. If the star had been closer to the back of the room, then it would have been reachable with VSC and a ground pound. Other than that, there are a few pipe dreams like spawning displacement in the title screen demo, but none of that is remotely close to work. In fact, the demo in Princess's Secret Slide never presses any buttons, so it couldn't even break the box even if it had the chance. Next up is Tiny Huge Island. Here, the one star with remaining A presses is Wiggler's Red Coins. This, in fact, is one of the 2 stars left in the game that requires 2 A presses to get. The first one to clear this gap, and the second one to get on these pillars. I'm repeating myself here, but again, this room just doesn't have much to work with. Isolated platforms with large height disparities, no way to clone anything, and just this one fire spitter. However, there is the floor above. Here you can find Wiggler running around and some coins. It's not much better, but it's something. And as it turns out, it is possible to use Wiggler to set up hyperspeed. Unfortunately, no way has ever been found to clip down into the red coins room, so that high speed is useless. Crazier strategies were also looked at. Having Wiggler itself come down seems impossible and not even helpful.
What the fuck?
The Stardance clip could be good, if not for the only available coins being in unhelpful locations, the need for a flame clone which is impossible, and for the 100 coin star already being required to reach the mainland in the first place. Using sliding speed conservation to carry hyperspeed into the red coins room seemed quite promising, but unlike a pause exit, this map transition doesn't preserve sliding speed. Ultimately, the search turned up fruitless. The second star with 2 remaining A presses is Wing Mario Over the Rainbow, and here we've got the most solid A press in the entire game. You can't fly without an A press. Mario can start flying in only 3 ways, with a triple jump, a cannon shot, or in this one specific exception if he starts the level already flying. Due to the nature of this level, collecting all the red coins without flying is unimaginable. So, of the 14 A presses left, this is by far the one that's the most absolutely sure to never be saved. With that in mind though, there have been some ideas thrown around to at least reduce the star to a single cannon shot instead of 2. The problem here is pretty simple. From the start of the stage, you need to go to the bottom of the level to talk to the pink Bob-omb and activate the cannons. The lowest cannon is too low and too weak to shoot Mario all the way up to the top of the stage, so one shot from the high cannon is also required for a total of 2 A presses. Note that entering the level takes 1 A press by itself, so you can't open the cannons and re-enter the stage. The only way would be by dying, but there's no way to take damage without an A press from this spot. Even assuming you could re-enter the stage with the cannons already open, only the lowest cannon is accessible without an A press anyway. There's one more glimmer of hope. When Mario is flying against the edge of the map, he's actually able to build up speed. Unfortunately, the speed at which Mario accelerates with this method is much too slow, and the wing cap has a limited timer. On top of that, the timer can't be refreshed because Mario can't break boxes while flying unless he's flying very slowly. Therefore, there's no way to build up meaningful speed because you'd constantly need to give up all that speed to refresh your flying timer. Another level with 2 A presses is Shifting Sand Land. Here though, it's just 1 A press but repeated on 2 different stars to get out of the elevator for Inside the Ancient Pyramid and Pyramid Puzzle. The elevator is particularly annoying because its walls are just 7 units too high for a dive recover to clear them. There's also the option of climbing the entire pyramid, which sounds terrible but surprisingly doesn't look too bad. After a precise knockback bounce to warp past this pole and a Stardance clip to get up to here, things are looking up. But then all hope is lost when Mario faces another pole. With no warp available, no helpful knockback source, and no way to clone anything, this A press seems unavoidable. Specifically for Inside the Ancient Pyramid, things look even worse. A second A press is needed to reach the star, although a Stardance clip has been shown to work. Of course, you can only have one Stardance clip at once. The pole A press also serves to get on top of this grindle and clear the next ledge. Without that jump, this little step just barely too high for a dive recover would have to be cleared using an amp clip. These amps are unique. Instead of going in a circle, they chase Mario. This corner is just barely close enough to make an amp appear. With the clever lure, it shocks Mario and he grabs the ledge, just like a Stardance clip. Theoretically, an amp clip could also get Mario up to the star, but it doesn't work. In short, the amp might not go that high up, and it won't stay this far from its home long enough for a double amp clip. But regardless, the problem is the pole. Without a way to get past the pole, nothing matters. There is, however, one remote possibility involving IROCs. If an IROC is about to pound the ground but it starts its movement while already touching the ground, it can shoot upwards into infinity. This idea has some potential, but outside of hacking its position, the IROC has never been made to enter this state. Even if it did though, it rises so fast that Mario would clip through it instead of being carried up. Last but not least, this is perhaps the most infamous ape press of them all, the pole in Bowser in the Fire Sea. From the very beginning, Tyler Caney's primary focus was to make a 70-star run in Zero ape presses a reality. For over 7 years, this one ape press has been the only barrier between him and his goal. Even worse, it is actually possible to get past the pole, but only on the Wii Virtual Console. But the fact that it's an emulated re-release and its incompatibility with the Japanese N64 exclusive glitches have always tarnished the Zero ape press full game run in the minds of Tyler Caney and the ABC community. A blueprint to make it possible on Nintendo 64 has been in the works for years and years, but several hurdles remain. The idea is actually similar to the Lethal Lava Land strategy. It consists of supplying thousands of speed to one or more bullies, then using squish cancel and the rotational displacement of one of these platforms to send Mario up as he travels to a parallel universe. When he comes back, he's now past a pole. The setup is a bit more complex than in Lethal Lava Land. Here's a rundown of how it works. I'll give you time to read it. It boils down to this problem. The platform rotates because of Mario's weight on it. As such, the rotational displacement applied to Mario is almost always going to be negative. Getting a positive displacement from this platform requires a sudden burst of speed that isn't possible to achieve with normal movement. The only currently known way to do it would need 3 different bullies, all hovering at ludicrous speeds and pinpoint precise positions.
Ludicrous speed?
Only there's a single bully down here, so this cannot work. This theoretical solution was created after years of work by Tyler Caney. He did it by hacking the speed and position of each bully, and its purpose is to serve as a demonstration that the idea of a PU speed squish cancel up warp in Bowser in the Fire Sea can work on paper given the right conditions. This wishful thinking would take a massive leap towards reality if it was shown to be possible using only one hyperspeed bully. And in fact, that's exactly what happened just a week ago when Spud Y2K showed off a route using the 10K glitch that would theoretically require a single bully. But despite the creation of multiple different brute forcers to try and find favorable conditions, there's still a lot of work to be done to bring this idea to reality. This is the brick wall the ABC community needs to break through. The actual bully battery is thought to be relatively trivial in comparison to this massive problem, although it could take significantly longer than the mere 26 hours of Lethal Lava Land. There are also 4 half-ape presses remaining in the run. One for Watch for Rolling Rocks to use elevators with PU speed, 2 entire guard dogs to swim with the shell for cloning, and 1 for Get a Hand to kick the wall to set up spawning displacement. With so many other ape presses left, it seems very unlikely that we'll ever run into a situation where these half-ape presses become a problem for the 120-star run. Here's my own judgment of how likely each ape press is to ever be saved. It's entirely subjective, and while I believe the gist of it is generally agreed on, the exact ordering is pure speculation. Of all these ape presses, the most likely to be saved is definitely Bowser in the Fire Sea. A long way behind would be Jolly Roger Bay, then Shifting Sand Land and the second canon of Wing Mario Over the Rainbow. Even less likely would be one of the 2 ape presses in Tiny Huge Island, followed by all of the stage entries with a slight favor towards Tick-Tock Clock. At rock bottom, you can find saving both ape presses in Tiny Huge Island, the Princess's Secret Slide box, and finally, the first canon in Wing Mario Over the Rainbow. The final, perfectly optimized ape press count might very well be 13. If we're slightly more optimistic, maybe 10 or 11. If we're wildly optimistic, it could get down to about a handful. I see no possible scenario where the entire game could ever get down to 0. But regardless of the final frontier of the ABC, there will always be the endless secondary challenge of making the run faster and more efficient. Over the years, countless improvements have been made that cut dozens of hours from the total runtime. A full 70-star run in Zero ape presses has been in the works for years, but it's stuck waiting for Bowser in the Fire Sea to be solved in Nintendo 64. Meanwhile, the estimated time for a 120-star run in 14 ape presses is now 58 hours and 47 minutes. Over 2/3 of that can be attributed to Elevator Tour and the Volcano and Tick-Tock Clock combined. Over 22 years, the A-Button Challenge has become the most fascinating video game endeavor of all time. In 2000, when Alex Penev posed this challenge to a handful of friends on IRC, he couldn't even begin to imagine what would become of it. Neither would Curtis Bright, who tried to turn it into a new form of competition on his website. His vision and forward thinking to allow tool-assisted speedruns to compete on his board paved the way for the revolutionary work of Bob Mario 511, who set the baseline for years to come. At the same time, Tiago Trujillo attacked the real-time version of the challenge almost all on his own, an achievement that, to this day, is still underrated. But by all means, this amazing adventure would have never happened without the now legendary PanenKoek 2012. His incredible work on the A-Button Challenge inspired multiple generations, coming in waves over the next 9 years. First came Plush, Ganody, and Sonic Packer, who supplemented Panen's work with novel ideas. Then Tyler Caney, whose fresh outlook brought 3 major trick discoveries that shaved off dozens of A-presses, and Bad Boot, who not only made key discoveries but also rekindled the real-time ABC. In recent years, Marbler took the complexity level to a new galaxy, helped by the involvement of talented and dedicated problem solvers like Iver Songe, DS273, and SJMHRP. The team has evolved so much, but at its core, the infallible PanenKoek remains the captain of the mission. His commitment to the journey and his undying resilience continue to amaze hundreds of thousands of people to this day. The legacy left by PanenKoek and the A-Button Challenge cannot be overstated. It inspired so many other game communities to do the same. Just to name a few, pretty much all of the Mario games. The 2D Mario games would seem boring at a glance, but they're actually full of surprises. Super Mario World is especially interesting, considering that all 96 exits can be done in only 24 A or B presses. More recently, the new Super Mario Bros. Wii Jumpless Challenge done by Adil is getting a lot of attention. Super Mario Sunshine and both Galaxy games have to waste hundreds of A-presses in menus, but they are quite optimized in terms of actual gameplay. Most 3D Sonic games also have an A-Button Challenge. In fact, Shadow the Hedgehog was beaten entirely in 0 A-presses by Ring Rush. The Donkey Kong 64 ABC, which is also led by Ring Rush, is absolutely full of clever solutions and goofy tricks. Its sister games Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie both have A-Button challenges of their own as well. The Super Mario 64 ABC also inspired a myriad of more or less loosely related challenges, such as the B and Z button challenges, the No Buttons challenge, and the No Joystick challenge. Even in other games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, any % low pauses or all dungeons no doors, beating Sonic 3 without pressing right, and half of Steve Gaming's YouTube channel. The list is absolutely endless. So, this is it. This is the current state of the A-Button Challenge. 14 A-presses remain. Dozens of blueprints exist to try and save them. One of them is being actively worked on and is thought to be possible. Only one. After all these years, the community has finally hit a wall. With all its dead ends, the current outlook for the future of the A-Button Challenge does look a bit grim. But the community around it keeps growing. Over the years, the entire Super Mario 64 code was fully decompiled. Countless simulators were written to investigate billions and billions of possibilities. There's still work ahead of us. There might always be. Mount Everest wasn't designed to be climbable.
No.
Mountains don't care if anyone manages to reach the top of them.
Stop.
Super Mario 64
Stop building up.
Stop.
Stop
it.
The game doesn't care if it's possible. We do.
Do not.
And until we reach the top, we will keep climbing.
Don't you fucking dare. Don't you fucking dare.
I fucking hate you.
Don't you fucking dare.
I fucking hate that ending. Why you be...
Faye.
What's up?
There is actually another part. That was only 7
It just
parts.
hasn't been released yet?
That was only 7. There's an 8.
No, that was chapter 8, remaining 8 presses. That was 8 chapters.
Was it? Was it the 8 chapters?
Yeah, early history,
Okay.
PanenKoek Revolution,
Woo.
Challenge to Science, Genius of Tyler Caney, Mario Enters Parallel Universes, The Modern
Okay,
Era,
thank fuck.
Final 8 press saves, and the remaining 8 presses.
Uh,
That was all 8.
okay, thank fuck. Oh,
There's
God.
a chapter 9 that just hasn't been released yet. Because it's not been done yet.
Oh, thank God that was it for now. Because I don't think my brain can take anymore. Holy shit. Now we watch a game with a simple I don't think I can handle that. Plus it's like it's 450. But there you go. There's the is that the link to the video, Faye?
That's the video, yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Holy shit. Doing the ABC challenge next stream. I don't think I can actually play Mario 64 yet on stream. My brain power is just gone.
Nah, fuck that. I'm just playing Pokemon next stream. Fuck that. I'll bet I can do Pokemon in the fucking no A presses. Goddamn.
Can you?
Probably. Just press B to do everything.
Oh yeah, that is right. It is press B to do everything. Well, shit. You probably could.
I realized an issue with my clothing.
Thank you, Thank you, Squidge.
Have a nice day, Squid.
Have a good day.
I realized an issue with my clothing setup.
Oh.
But I'm not gonna say it.
That's fair. I'm gonna switch screens back to the just chatting screen. Okay. Because we do not have time to watch anything else today.
No, we're done.
That's it. That's the videos. That's all the videos for today.
That's all the video for today. Correction. That was just one video.
That is all of the quantum physics I can handle for today.
Wait, what do you think is wrong with my clothing setup, Red? What do you think is wrong with my clothing setup, Red? Well, you said you know what it is. Oh, so yeah, technically that was a film. Correction.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, talking about actual clothes. What do you think my issue with my actual clothing setup is, Red? If you guess close enough, I'll elaborate.
I'm very curious.
I'll leave that open to you too as well, Danny. No, I mean actual clothes, like real life clothes, not in regards to my model.
Is it pants or shirt?
No. Bedtime. Ba-ba. Da-da. Ba-ba. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Ba-da-da.
Because the only thing that I could think of other than pants would be shirt.
You're right. Those are the two main parts of clothing. Is pants and a shirt.
Exactly.
Man, you're on point.
Yeah. That's like the capacity of my brain after listening to quantum physics for the past fuck, it's been 4 hours, hasn't it? Jesus.
Yes, it has been 4 hours today.
God damn. Also, can I say that I'm equally excited for tomorrow?
I'm not entirely sure what we're doing tomorrow. I haven't quite decided.
But you know why I'm excited?
No, it's not buttons failing. I don't have buttons on my shirt.
I am excited because we're doing something together again.
It's that over time, my shirt gives up and rolls up over my tits and just fucking shows them off. It just gives up on containing them.
Ayo. To be fair, do you expect any other response from me?
No.
No, that's awesome though, Faye. Legit.
Quick, fucking raid before Cat the villain redeems bots. Raid. Fuck, get us the fuck out of here. Go!
You know who's live right now? I appreciate those kind words.
Yeah. Ruger's live. Go there. Go Ruger.
That's actually what I was gonna
go. Before Cat fucking redeem squats. No. Yeah. Fucking go. Danny, stop being stun locked. Go.
I'm not being stun locked.
You are. I can hear you in your brain. I can hear the dial-up theme.
I typed it in wrong. There we go. This should be correct.
Okay. Yeah. Cat, get
there we
go. Yeah. Go.
We're gonna raid Rue. Rue, good friend.
We're raiding the Rue.
Thank you for hanging out today. Appreciate all of you.
Go.
I'll see you tomorrow. Go. Face a raid.
Hey,
I know. I'll use my frying pan as a drying
pan. Right there.
God damn it! Well, I guess I'm doing these squats after stream. Well, thank you all for stopping by. Thank you, Faye. Go give Rue some love. Rue is a very good friend.
But can you do all of those squats without pressing A?
Yes, because I don't press A to squat.
Fuck. I want to play Donkey Kong 60 sometime.
Okay. That'll be fun to watch, actually.
You like Donkey Kong 64?
Donkey Kong good. Donkey Kong fun.
Okay, you just like Donkey Kong.
Perhaps.
What's your favorite Donkey Kong game?
I have Donkey Kong Country on the GBA. That being said, it's about to raid.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.